Thank you.
Today's subject, I wanted to throw out a name that I don't think has been mentioned.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242.
Or visit tomsbeets.com. Today we're reading from Requiem for the American Dream, The 10 Principles of Concentration of Wealth and Power by Noam Chomsky. Brand new book. From the preface, a note on the American Dream. During the Great Depression, which I'm old enough to remember, it was bad, much worse objectively than today. But there was a sense that we'll get out of this somehow, an expectation that things are going to get better. Maybe we don't have jobs today, but they'll be coming back tomorrow and we can work together for a brighter future. This was a time of a lot of political radicalism that would hopefully lead to a different future, one with more justice, equality, and freedom. Breaking down repressive class structures, and so on. There was just a general sense that this will work out somehow. Most of my family, for instance, were unemployed working class. The rise of the union movement itself was a reflection of, and a source of, optimism and hopefulness. And that's missing today. Today there's a general feeling that nothing's coming back. It's over. The American dream, like most dreams, has large elements of myth to it. Part of the 19th century dream was the Horatio Alger story. We're dirt poor, but we're going to work hard and we'll find a way out of it, which was true to an extent. Take my father, who came in 1913 from a very poor village in Eastern Europe. He was able to get a job in a sweatshop in Baltimore and gradually work himself up to the point where he could go to college, get a degree, and finally even a PhD. He ended up living what's called a middle-class lifestyle. A lot of people could do that. It was possible for immigrants from Europe in the early days to achieve a level of wealth, privilege, freedom, and independence that wouldn't have been imaginable in their countries of origin. But now we simply know that that's not true anymore. Social mobility, in fact, is lower here than it is in Europe. But the dream persists, fostered by propaganda. You hear it in every political speech. Vote for me, you'll get the dream back. They all reiterate it in similar words. You even hear it from people who are destroying the dream, whether they know it or not. But the dream has to be sustained. Otherwise, how are you going to get people in the richest, most powerful country in world history with extraordinary advantages to face the reality that they see around them? Inequality is really unprecedented. If you look at total inequality now, it's like the worst periods of American history. But if you refine it more closely, the inequality comes from the extreme wealth in a tiny sector of the population, a fraction of the 1%. There were periods like the Gilded Age in the 1890s and the Roaring '20s and so on, when a situation developed rather similar to this. But the current period is extreme. Because if you look at the wealth distribution, the inequality comes mostly from super wealthy. Literally, the top 0.1% are just super wealthy. This is the result of over 30 years of a shift in social and economic policy. If you check, you find that over the course of these years, the government policy has been modified completely against the will of the population to provide enormous benefits to the very rich. And for most of the population, the majority, real incomes have almost stagnated for over 30 years. The middle class, in that sense, that unique American sense, is under severe attack. A significant part of the American dream is class mobility. You're born poor, you work hard, you get rich. The idea that it's possible for everyone to get a decent job, buy a home, get a car before their children go to school, and have their children go to school, it's all collapsed. Take a look at American society. Imagine yourself looking down from Mars. What do you see? In the United States, there are professed values like democracy. In a democracy, public opinion is going to have some influence on policy, and then the government carries out actions determined by the population. That's what democracy means. It's important to understand that privileged and powerful sectors have never liked democracy, and for very good reasons. Democracy puts power into the hands of the general population and takes it away from the privileged and powerful. It's a principle of concentration of wealth and power. Concentration of wealth yields concentration of power, particularly so as the cost of elections skyrockets, which forces the political parties even more deeply into the pockets of major corporations. This political power quickly translates into legislation that then increases the concentration of wealth. So fiscal policy, like tax policy, deregulation, rules of corporate governance, and a whole variety of measures, political measures designed to increase the concentration of wealth and power, yields more political power to do the same thing. And that's what we've been seeing. So we have this kind of vicious cycle in progress. I mean, the wealthy always did have an inordinate amount of control over policy. Actually, that goes back centuries. It's so traditional that it was described by Adam Smith in 1776. You read the famous Wealth of Nations. He says in England, quote, "The principal architects of policy are the people who own the society." In his day, in Adam Smith's day, merchants and manufacturers. And they make sure that their own interests are very well cared for, however grievous the impact on the people of England or others. Now, it's not merchants and manufacturers, it's financial institutions and multinational corporations. The people who Adam Smith called the masters of mankind, and they're following the vile maxim, all for ourselves and nothing for anyone else. They're just going to pursue policies that benefit them and harm everyone else. Well, that's a pretty general maxim of politics that's been studied closely in the United States. Those are the policies that have increasingly been followed. And in the absence of a general popular reaction, that's pretty much what you'd expect. Then we get into principle number 1, reduce democracy. And, he goes through his 10 principles. The book, Requiem for the American Dream.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you, and it's the first hour of our Wednesday program, so it must be middays with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us. He is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He represents the state of Wisconsin brilliantly. His website, pocan.house.gov, and you can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan, M-A-R-K-P-O-C-A-N. Congressman Pocan, welcome back.
Hey, Tom. It's good to be here.
It's great having you with us. So I'm wondering what you're seeing. We've got the FCC. Apparently in the Senate, they've got enough votes, enough Democrats signed on to do a resolution of disapproval, which under the Congressional Review Act could nullify Ajit Pai's destruction of net neutrality. I don't know how that's going to play in the House. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. You've got DACA, you got the border wall. There's a bunch going on in your world. What bring us up to date? What are your thoughts on all this stuff?
I'll try to give you 4 subjects if I can quickly, because I know we want to get calls in. One, yes. Clearly the FCC decision. I think this is one where we can get bipartisan support, and we should really put people pressure on members of Congress and the Senate. When I had contacts, it was over 6,400 contacts against the decision they made. No one who supported it. And I haven't looked at the numbers in the last probably week to 10 days, but it was huge numbers. Republicans are getting those numbers too, because it's not a decision that helps anybody other than people at the telecommunication company executive offices. So I think that's positive, and I'm glad that we've got that going in the Senate, and let's make sure we make a lot of organizing around that. DACA, we're waiting to see the president, he seems to go hot and cold all the time, saying he wants a $18 billion wall and trade, and originally he didn't want anything, and now, we're in negotiations on the continuing resolution to keep government open past the 19th. So we'll see what happens, although that might be punted for yet another month, Tom, because Congress doesn't like to actually do the things we're supposed to.
Well, at least the Republicans in Congress, I would say.
Republicans in Congress, the leadership, absolutely. I mean, I use the word pathetic that, they're in charge of everything and they still can't govern. We plan on around the country. House Democrats will be doing a lot on Saturday around the GOP tax scam. I'll be doing a Facebook Live town hall myself on my Facebook page. But we're going to have events around the country letting people know exactly what's in this bill because it's a terrible bill that's not going to help the middle class. It's really great for the top 1% and for corporations and for foreign corporations, but not so much for real people across the country. And I think the last thing I'm trying to add, and it's a whole bunch of things that happen around election stuff, but the top one you saw today, Darrell Issa is not running for re-election. Earlier this week, Ed Royce from California, not running for re-election. He's a chair of a committee, one of 6 committee chairs on the Republican side, not running for re-election. We saw the Kobach Commission disband because they can't prove voter fraud, even though they've been doing their darndest to try to do it. You and I both know it simply doesn't exist. Even PolitiFact said they gave me a true, and I said you're more likely to get struck by lightning than commit in-person voter fraud. North Carolina, a case around gerrymandering, making them redraw congressional lines. Case in Ohio on voter purging, the Senate Dems on Russia involvement in the election, a lot of election stuff going on right now. And, that's some of the stuff I'm looking at and following, Tom.
Yeah, it's remarkable. There's all this talk about Russian interference in the election, and one piece of that is the speculation that a foreign government, in this case it's Russia, could have hacked into our voting machines and our voting tabulators, particularly the tabulating computers, and altered the outcome of the election. If the Russians could do this, so could, to paraphrase Donald Trump, a 400-pound guy in his basement in Cleveland. Why are Republicans not concerned about that?
Well, and that's the thing. I think part of it's the politics of the whole issue of collusion. They're trying to, everyone should look the other way, and they're even trying to still, I think, many of them disband the Miller investigation, which I think is, showing how desperate they are and how much they're in trouble in 2018. But, we've introduced the bill, and we've talked before in your program, the Voter Roll Integrity Act, which would address a lot of those concerns about how to make sure that we're protecting our election systems, considering them part of our critical national infrastructure, making sure that everything from voting companies to others have additional protections in place. And we would love to see that get passed. We'd always love to have more sponsors. So, it's one that I know when we talk about interstate cross-check and things like that, this addresses many of those issues. It's H.R. 3091, and if people would reach out to their member of Congress and ask them to sign on, that would be very helpful.
Great. Anything else on your plate, or shall we pick up calls?
Why don't we take calls? Callers always have great issues coming up.
There you go. Okay, Roger in Richmond, Virginia. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, my name is Roger Young, and I just want to hear what you guys have to say, Congressman Pocan or Tom. What will the Chinese, how will that affect America, Chinese trying to stop buying American Treasury and bonds?
It's a good question.
I think it would have a huge impact, right? Because they own so many. It's interesting how we work and treat China. I've always been more of someone who wants to go through diplomatic channels than military channels in general. But just how we're treating China, as much as we really need to have a good relationship with them right now when it comes to North Korea, because so much of the North Korean economy goes through China. We need to have better relationships. And, just on the floor yesterday, they had a couple resolutions kind of, just poking at China on different issues. And, the White House is hot and cold, sometimes within only, a couple days of how they treat China. And, I do get concerned because we have to have a working relationship with especially countries like China. And with what's going on in North Korea, I can't imagine a better time to try to make sure we're working closely with them.
Yeah. Russell in Hickory Hills, Illinois, listening to WCPT. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, yeah, Mr. Pocan, it's nice to talk to you. How come you Democrats ain't screaming about offsets for this $18 billion he wants for the wall? Like, take it out of the military. Remember Sandy? When it hit New Jersey, that's all they screamed about was offsets, offsets, offsets. Can't you guys bring that up, say, let's take it out of the military, or we're not going to give you the $18 billion? What do you say to that?
Well, Russell, we're a step before that even. We're not giving you $18 billion, period. We don't care where you get it from. We don't want a wall. So I think that's probably why you're not hearing us talk about offsets, because we're still saying we don't need to waste money, period, on a wall. And I think that's been a very strong position across almost every single Democrat that we have. So, why go down to his rhetoric? He said Mexico is going to pay for a wall. He's already got us paying for a wall. We don't want a wall, and we haven't changed our position. So we're staying strong on that, and we're still trying to fix the DACA problem that was created by Donald Trump, because I think that's our more pressing issue right now.
Yeah, we're just a little less than a minute before we hit the next hard break. On that issue, wouldn't a more effective way of preventing people from illegally entering the United States be to start throwing employers in jail for hiring people who are not U.S. citizens? It seems to me, I mean, that's how the law was prior to 1986 when Reagan stopped enforcing that provision. And that's when, prior to that, you had, 500,000 to 750,000 people coming into the country every year around picking season, but then leaving the country after picking season. It was mostly in California. But people started staying when Reagan stopped putting largely white, wealthy employers in jail.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many other things that would actually be dealing with the problem they say that we need to deal with rather than building a giant wall.
Yeah, it seems to me like we have an illegal employer problem, not an illegal immigrant problem. And I've been saying this for a long, long time, and it just, and weirdly, I mean, there are Republicans who agree with me on that. Anyhow, we're hitting a break here. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us. It's Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program, taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a few minutes. You can find his website at pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at repmarkpocan, REPMARKPOCAN, and we'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Middays with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour right after this. And welcome back. Fred in Los Angeles, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
This got me. This to Jerusalem got me thinking about something. Why can't Jerusalem become an independent state like the Vatican?
Yeah, well, I tell you, what needs to happen is we have to have Palestine and Israel get together and figure out the issue of the borders. I mean, many of us have long stood by a two-state solution going back to essentially the 67 borders with some trade-offs. And I think, what Donald Trump did, again, for all the wrong reasons, by saying he's going to move an embassy there, not only did he disrupt the entire world community around this issue, and especially, countries with Muslim populations and countries in the region, but he's ignited now a debate. We saw the Netanyahu's party in Israel is now starting to talk again about a one-party solution or one-state solution because they think they have the military might. And when I was last in the region, some of the folks from Hamas were talking about a one-state solution because they think they have the might in numbers and people. And, I think for a long time, many of us have been arguing for a two-state solution. And I think this has been very detrimental to peace in the Middle East. And let me just add this too, Fred. Last time I was in the region, I left there clearly with the understanding that until we have peace between the countries there, we are giving ammunition to ISIS because they use this in their recruitment. If we actually solve this issue, ISIS would lose much of what they have in trying to recruit people. So what the president did was dumb across multiple levels.
What are the various options for doing something right?
Well, I mean, what's going to happen now is we're not going to be involved, right? They've already said the U.S. is now taken aside, essentially. So we have to hope others in the world community step up and just try to get the two together and facilitate conversation. That's what has to happen. And unfortunately, we were often the people that did that, but Donald Trump single-handedly took us out of that role by making the declaration he did, which we still have yet to find a reason why he did that. So it's unfortunate, and we're going to need other world partners, whether it be Germany or whatever other countries may want to step in, maybe especially from the region. We need to have those conversations happen and solve this issue, because right now all we've did is throw gasoline on a fire. Yeah,
we do. We have 40 seconds to the break. I'm curious, are you seeing any or hearing any indication from your fellow members of Congress that there is any appetite in Congress to do something about this? Or is this something that Congress really can't do anything about now?
I think it would be hard with this Republican majority to do something. There's a lot of rhetoric when it comes to Israel and Palestine. And one of the other things, Tom, we have to watch for, too, is we think the president's going to take away funding, that the little bit of funding that goes to Palestine, as well as Pakistan and other places, because they need some money to do things like the wall and other things. And
tax cuts for billionaires.
Very detrimental.
Yeah.
Of course they won't tax the rich, right? They just gave them more money.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, Congressman Mark Pocan with us. We'll be back in just a moment with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan. It's Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hey,
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity,
resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
Welcome back. Congressman Mark Pocan on the line with us, taking your calls, Middays with Mark. And Judd in Las Vegas, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Oh, thank you very much. Good to talk to you, fellas.
Thank you.
I'm just really concerned about the whole Mueller investigation getting derailed by all the latest I heard on Stephanie's program. They were talking about how both senators now, the Senate is siding, and siding with Trump and everything. So, I mean, what is there anything to really prevent them? Because if he can get rid of Sessions, which I guess he's trying to do, he can put somebody else in there and come along without being recused and just say, "Oh, this is nothing. Let's get rid of it."
Yeah, Judd, your concern on this issue is very valid because clearly they would love to get rid of this investigation. Watching the president say they've been investigating for a year and they've proven there's no collusion is ridiculous, right? Because they just keep honing in closer and closer and closer to him in his campaign. We've seen a few people from the Tea Party, Jim Jordan, I think, and maybe it was Mark Meadows, and another member say that they're trying to go after Attorney General Sessions, or just what you said, so they can get someone in to try to shut down the investigation. I think, though, this is one where they're so far out of the loop of reality because the public knows what's going on. There is public support for this, and it goes beyond just Democrat, Republican, Independent. And if they do this, they will look awful for doing it. And I think we just have to keep our public pressure. We need to, on a regular basis, call our members of Congress and our senators and say, if you do anything about this investigation, you're not going back to Congress. And we just have to be very clear on that because this has been a very fair, thought-out investigation. It has to run the course. And they can't try to get away with whether it be getting rid of Sessions or Mueller in some other way. We have to, as the public, stay where we're at right now, which is opposed to that.
Yeah. Steve in McVeigh, Pennsylvania. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, and I'll try to make this quick. I have a two-part on DACA. The first one is people talk about comprehensive immigration reform. I was wondering if the congressman could tell me what's wrong with the current laws we have that you need to change them with comprehensive immigration reform. And the other part is, how do we prevent this from happening 20 years down the road where we have millions of people coming in here and we're right back in this? And should that be part of the DACA, this comprehensive reform? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so this is, Donald Trump just recently coming up with this. And, of course, according to Donald Trump, this is all stuff that comes out of the alt-right movement, right? Almost, chain migration. Everything he says is their language and their rhetoric. So I don't believe he's really about immigration reform. To be fair, I think it was 2 sessions ago, there was a bipartisan compromise that came out of the Senate that had pretty strong support from both parties that would have provided some extra border security and things that probably were required or necessary, but also had a pathway to citizenship for aspiring Americans. That didn't get through the House. And I think if you want to talk comprehensive, there is a foundation to look at. But I don't think Donald Trump is talking about that kind of foundation. Donald Trump doesn't believe in anyone being here. He just kicked out people from El Salvador now. He's been a pattern of this country after country. He's going down the rhetoric of the alt-right movement on this, and I'm just not buying it right now. So, we're going to be very steadfast on DACA should be fixed because you broke it. We don't trade for this. A wall is not going to happen with any Democratic support. And, we're open to comprehensive immigration reform. It's just because you use the words doesn't mean we're talking about the same thing.
I think he likes the word comprehensive. It sounds big. Jack in Pine Valley, California, you're on with Congressman Pocan. We got about a minute and a half to the break, so make it quick, please.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on Schumer or Pelosi negotiating with Trump to avoid a government shutdown only if Trump shows us his tax returns?
Yeah, Jack, I'll tell you, as much as, we should see them, and especially after the tax bill, would really love to see them. He said he wasn't going to benefit. Clearly, he's going to benefit. But I think we have real policy stuff like DACA and like making sure we keep that dollar-for-dollar agreement on non-military spending so we don't see cuts to programs that actually benefit people. I think they're probably at a higher level and more important than the tax return issue in and of itself. Even though we still push it, we still take votes on it, we're trying to get them. I think on this we have to negotiate at a very much a policy level.
Yeah. Joe in Tucson, Arizona. We got 1 minute. Quick one. Joe?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're on the air.
I want to take you off speaker. I just wanted to ask the congressman, how come nobody is bringing up the fact that we got a $34 a month increase in Social Security, but Medicare Part B went up $30, my Part D went up $15, and my supplement went up $20. Where's the increase?
Yeah, no, trust us. Many of us have. I mean, we, as the Progressive Caucus, I think one of the things we've been trying to do is change that increase to Social Security period to be the CPI-E, which takes in consideration expenses that seniors have. 25% of the income is on medicines, and my 88-year-old mother, almost 89, is not driving anymore, so gasoline inflation doesn't affect her. So we're talking about all these things, and in fact, what we're going to be talking about as we talk about this tax policy is now that they blew the hole in the deficit, they're now going after those programs, and we're going to have to all fight together for that.
Amen. Congressman Mark Pocan with us, taking your calls for the hour. Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at @RepMarkPocan. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan on Middays with Mark right after this. And welcome back to our Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Devil's Bargain by Joshua Green, the subtitle Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency. This is from the afterword, the very last chapter. It's titled Kali Yuga, which in Hinduism is when the earth goes into a phase of destruction. In the shell-shocked aftermath of the election, President Obama, looking shaken, appeared in the White House Rose Garden to deliver public remarks intended to project a sense of calm. A sense, really, that the basic stability of our country remained intact. Sun is up, Obama said. I know everybody had a long night. I did as well. Had a chance to talk to President-elect Trump last night about 3:30 in the morning, I think it was, to congratulate him on winning the election. End of quote. The next day, when the two men appeared together in the Oval Office, it felt as if the world had slipped through the looking glass. Trump quickly named Bannon his chief White House strategist. Republicans controlled every branch of government. With Trump's ability to defy every political norm, anything seemed possible. Who could argue otherwise after what had just transpired? And yet, within days of his inauguration, Trump's White House was plunged into chaos and scandal from which it has not recovered and may never. Bannon, the imaginative reconceiver of U.S. politics, hung streams of paper listing Trump's promises from the walls of his West Wing office. His strategy, as always, was to launch furious attacks, this time to, quote, shock the system, end quote, and rapidly reorient the federal government in a more nationalist direction. He called this, with what I took to be intentional irony, a shock and awe approach to asserting Trump's power. But Trump's flurry of activity quickly ran into problems. There was his executive order, sprung a week after his inauguration, banning immigrants from 7 majority Muslim countries, which set off nationwide protests and was blocked by the courts. His firing 2 weeks later of National Security Director Michael Flynn for contacts with the Russians. The collapse of his first major legislative initiative, a bill to repeal Obamacare. His firing of FBI Director James Comey. And the swift descent of the West Wing into a viper's nest of backstabbing and leaks. This quick turn toward a crack-up was hardly unforeseeable or even altogether surprising, but it contrasted sharply with the success of a candidate who had dominated his opponents, shaped news coverage, and shown himself to be all but impervious to the forces that overwhelm other politicians. Bannon, whose wild gambits in the campaign had invariably paid off, seemed to run out of magic tricks when Hillary Clinton was no longer a target. The government wasn't as malleable to Trump and Bannon's aggressions as the Republican Party and the cable news channels had been, and they found themselves consistently thwarted and undermined by the courts, by right-wing hardliners in Congress, by their own inexperience and Trump's errant tweets, and by the bureaucracy they were now overseeing. The crises these failures precipitated in the White House cost Bannon much of his influence and soon threatened Trump's presidency. While still early in his term, the possibilities that Trump
Trump's most ardent supporters once imagined for his presidency already seem to be mostly foreclosed. I think there are three main reasons why Trump's administration has so quickly fallen into disorder and confusion. Number one, Trump thought being president was about asserting dominance. Just after he'd locked up the GOP nominations, Trump said something to me that crystallized his view of politics and explains, to my mind, much of his subsequent difficulties. Quote, I deal with people that are very extraordinarily talented people, he told me. I deal with Steve Wynn. I deal with Carl Icahn. I deal with killers that blow these politicians away. It's not even the same category. This, he meant politics, this is a category that's like 19 levels lower. You understand what I'm saying? Brilliant killers. Trump was equating politics with business and the presidency with the job of being a big shot CEO, a killer. He filled the upper ranks of his administration with people of a similar mindset. Gary Cohn, Wilbur Ross, Steve Bannon, aggressive, domineering men accustomed to getting their way by dint of their position. None had government experience, nor did many others in the West Wing. So none anticipated the problems this approach to governing would cause. Trump's self-conception as the all-powerful apprentice boss blinded him to a fundamental truth of the modern presidency, that the president needs Congress more than the Congress needs the president. Trump's domineering instinct served him poorly, since most members of Congress are secure in their jobs and accountable mainly to their own constituents. And it backfired disastrously when Trump fired Comey after he refused to submit to a pledge of loyalty to his boss. Number two, Trump ran against the Republican Party, Wall Street, and Paul Ryan, but then took up their agenda. Populists often struggle to govern, but Trump scarcely attempted to lead the populist revolution that he promised. In May, he told me he would transform the Republican Party into a workers' party. But while he kept voicing populist shibboleths, the legislative agenda he took up was the standard conservative fare pushed by Paul Ryan. During the GOP primary, Trump has shrewdly sensed its weak point, Ryan's desire to finance tax cuts for the rich by cutting programs like Social Security and Medicaid harmed the party's white blue-collar base. Trump told me he'd made this point to Ryan directly. He said, quote, there's no way a Republican is going to beat a Democrat when the Republican is saying we're going to cut your Social Security, and the Democrat is saying we're going to keep it and give you more. The book is Devil's Bargain by Joshua Green, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storm of the Presidency.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
Welcome back. Congressman Mark Pocan on the line with us, taking your calls. Middays with Mark for the hour. Congressman, you're still with us?
I am.
Yep. And Tom in Seymour, Illinois. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, I have one question. Whether the economic effect of the petrodollar versus the petro-yuan, are we in some sort of competition here?
Tom, I don't know if I have an answer to your question. Petrodollar versus petro.
Is the question, will the dollar continue to be the currency, the worldwide currency used to trade oil, or will that shift to, the Saudi basket that they said they were putting together, or the yuan the Chinese are proposing, those kind of things? Is that the question, Tom?
Yes.
Okay, Congressman?
Yeah. And I think a lot depends on, again, our relationship with the world on things. So we still have that economic might in this world, regardless. I think that helps us. But at some point, especially in that region, we show less and less of a leadership role. Who knows what could be impacted by that.
Yeah. Our phone number, 202-808-9925. Roger in Burton, Michigan. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Yeah, hi, Congressman. I was reading an article in the paper the other day and seeing something about an eye prescription that's going to be costing close to $750,000 to $1 million. Are you familiar with that?
Roger, not that particular one, but we have seen a bunch of prescriptions come through at $500,000 prices. The good news is they're actually effective in helping kids with leukemia. The bad news is how outrageous is that for a price? And I think, that's one of the things that a number of us in Congress Jan Schakowsky and Rosa DeLauro and Lloyd Doggett and myself, and I shouldn't go down the list. I'll get in trouble. Peter Welch and a bunch of others have been working on a task force around prescription drug pricing to try to, do something about it. As we know, it's gone out of control. They're paying people not to produce generics. There's a whole lot of bad behavior. And there could be a small glimmer of light in that when the head of the FDA appeared before my subcommittee on the Appropriations Committee, they expressed interest in at least around generics, as helping to promote generics a little quicker. And that would be great because in some cases people are trying to make sure they're not produced. But when it comes to prescription drug companies, it's one great reason of why we have to have regulation and government involvement, because otherwise it would be grand auto theft.
Yeah. Mark in Scio, Oregon. Am I saying that right?
Scio.
Scio, S-C-I-O. Okay. You're on with Congressman.
I was wondering why in this immigration thing that it's never mentioned about the affordable housing shortage. And, here in Oregon we have a sanctuary thing. And our homeless rate has grown 30% this year. And I just wonder what, in affordable housing, getting it built is like pulling teeth, everybody wants affordable housing, but they just don't want it in their neighborhood. So it's almost impossible to build. And, nobody ever mentions that these immigrants displace homeless people.
Except, Mark, you and I both live in Oregon. I drive by homeless communities all the time, and they're all Caucasian. I've never seen a Hispanic homeless person in this state.
Well, you want to understand this, Tom, that a lot of people are homeless because of bad credit rating.
No, I understand all that. I just don't see the connection to immigration. I'm sorry. I'm jumping in here. It should be you, Congressman. Mark, Congressman Pocan.
No problem. Mark, let me answer it in this way, and I think this is the concern that I have, is that with the $1.4 trillion hole, which is more than that, Tom, because if you take an interest over the 10 years, it's over $2 trillion blown into the deficit to pay for the tax breaks for the Republican donors. When we try to, right now, one of the things we're fighting for with the continuing resolution is to make sure that there's a dollar parity for the increases they're going to do to defense. We've always had a dollar for dollar increase with the other programming, and they're trying to break that. If you break that, where we're going to lose dollars for programs, is going to be things like housing. There's going to be things like helping the homeless. And that's why it's a major fight for Democrats, as you'll hear in the next week, and if it gets kicked for another month. Why we fight for that is because, it's so easy for those programs to be the last thing left behind, and then they go unfunded. So if you're concerned about those types of programs, understand the fight right now the Democrats are doing on the continuing resolution and any omnibus to keep government open.
Yeah. Hector, in El Paso, Texas. Hector, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you. Congressman,
Hi,
my
Hector.
question has to do with the Electoral College. I know in the past there's been discussions and moves on the part of some representatives and to eliminate the Electoral College. Is that still alive, or is that, in your opinion, never going to happen?
It's alive on life support. There are those of us who think that it's time to take another look at it because it has failed us now twice in very recent history. But the problem is right now you've got Paul Ryan in charge of the House, you've got Mitch McConnell in charge of the Senate, and you've got Donald Trump in the White House. And under those three, it would have a stake in its heart. We're fighting to keep it on life support until we can maybe get back in charge and have this debate. But right now, pragmatically, it's never going to happen with the people who are in charge of Congress and the White House.
Yeah. It's Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the number 202-808-9925. Daryl in White Springs, Florida. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, I have a question about North Korea.
Go for it.
I have a nutty idea. I don't know if it would work or not. It might not. But if we could get South Korea to just wire North Korea for internet and electricity, just see what happens.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think if people could have information about the outside, they probably would look at things a little differently. Our real problem right now is we've got, unfortunately, a leader of North Korea that doesn't seem to have a lot of respect for the people in North Korea, and we've got a leader here in the United States fighting almost at a juvenile level comparing size of buttons with that leader. And unfortunately, where we can have more impact in the country, making sure that we've got checks and balances, our checks and balances don't exist when it's a crazy tweet from our president to another foreign leader and what that impact could be. So, my concern really exists mostly around that. I think we have to have far better diplomatic relations and conversations with the Chinese on this issue specifically, since I think it's something like 90% of the North Korean economy comes through China. And, if there was something that they're looking for to not be nuclear, I think, those should be part of conversations we have in a diplomatic method. But right now, they're not happening, unfortunately, with this leader in the way they need to.
A number of us, Congressman, are quite concerned that Trump might actually start World War III with his tweets, his hubris. And I know a number of Democratic members of Congress are very concerned about that. Are you finding that your Republican colleagues are concerned about this? And if so, are they willing to speak out, or do they share their concerns, just among themselves? I mean, what's the situation there?
Yeah, privately, when it comes to international relations, they seem to care about the tweets privately because they know the impact, because we don't have the checks and balances within the system to assure people that even though he's doing that, he doesn't mean it, right? It's different when it's another nation. But, as we're watching Republicans jump from this ship, not running again. Darrell Issa, Ed Royce, just this week, 2 from California, where these tax cuts for the wealthy are going to hurt people even more than other places. They're getting out. So I think until they see the damage is so severe with this president, they know that their fortunes largely ride with his, and they're going to try to keep the ride until they have to let go. Unfortunately, they're choosing party over country, and again, privately, they understand the implications of the tweets when it comes to international relations, but we don't have them yet politically where we need to actually say what they think.
Yeah, which is tragic. Woodrow in Chicopee, Massachusetts. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Hi, Mark. And Tom, I'm a senior citizen, first-time caller. I have a question about the new tax bill. If I'm reading this thing right, people that are widows and widowers as low as $48,000 a year gross, your tax rate's going to go to 25%. If that's the case, I mean, that is a huge jump. It actually throws you in the basket of being single when you become a widower or widower. Now, you lose your spouse's income, but that's an outrageous tax rate. Is that true?
I couldn't tell you specifically on widows and widowers. I don't remember hearing something specific in that area. I was out during that vote, unfortunately, recovering from a triple bypass. But there are going to be actions around the country specifically explaining the details of the bill this Saturday by Democratic members of Congress. So perhaps in Massachusetts, you'll have an opportunity, since I think your delegation is all Democratic. Hopefully some folks there will be doing some stuff, and I think that'd be a great question if they have a live event or a Facebook Live event to ask on it. Our biggest concern on that tax bill still is, at the end of the 10-year period in 2027, 83% of all the tax benefits go to the top 1%. So it's skewed wrong in a lot of places. A lot of people are going to be paying more under this bill, and while they shoot a nickel or two to some folks in the short term, they're not taking into consideration if they cut Medicare or Social Security to help fill that hole they've created in the deficit. Then we all pay for that, and any small, modest increase you get now is going to be more than made up for that.
Yeah. Was this legislation largely written by lobbyists?
Oh, this was, right before Christmas. I'll bet you Christmas bonuses were abounding in all the companies that hire the lobbyists here, because it was almost exclusively. In fact, I would argue the Republicans who claim they wrote this bill, I've seen that they can't answer questions on it either. They don't know exactly what's in what they vote.
Right. They got to call up the lobbyists and ask them. Congressman Mark Pocan with us, taking your calls. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's our Middays with Mark hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, taking your calls right after this. And welcome back. Michael in Silver Springs, Nevada. You are on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Yes, Congressman, my question for you is about the Pell Grant system. My wife is 42 and she's returned to college and educated herself. And in my family, we're just getting back on our feet. I have a senior in high school, and he does not qualify for the same Pell Grants that my wife did. And I know this is something that the Democrats own, changing that system. And I would like to know why, in my household, my income would qualify for her, but not my children. And I feel like it's withholding education from my child. And it's really something I'd like to see the Democrats go back and straighten up. And I noticed that Mr. Trump likes to reverse everything the Democrats do. So would it be possible to try to get him to reverse this? Because it's really super unfair to me and my family and a lot of people in my community. The children are not being able to go to college. And they're waiting. You hear children say, well, I'm going to wait till I'm 25. And it just doesn't happen. My wife's on a local community board, and we're politically active. And when we talk about this, this is a real issue in our community. Do you have any comments?
Sure. I can tell you from being previously on the Budget Committee and the Education and Workforce Committee, and now I serve on Appropriations, but the Appropriations Subcommittee that governs higher education. We've had a problem because in the Senate we have Lamar Alexander, who's very powerful when it comes to higher education funding. And in the House, we've had Republicans who we need to do a higher education reauthorization, and they finally are kind of moving on it, but they're consolidating loans even more because they don't believe in the loan programs. And, I can tell you, Michael, I was a Pell Grant recipient because I grew up in a lower middle class family, and how important that was for me. And I don't think you should be picking up the ladder right now so other people can't access it. We've had this fight. There are a lot of Republicans who don't believe in Pell Grants especially, but even in loans. And the Perkins loans, for example, ended on September 30th. Reauthorization was supposed to happen. It still hasn't. That's a bill that I have with a Republican rep from New York, and we have 240 sponsors, and we still can't get a vote on the floor of Congress because of how they operate and why they want to consolidate all these programs. So,
can't you pull a discharge petition?
I'm sorry?
Can't you pull a discharge petition if you've got more than a majority of members?
The problem is then a lot of the Republicans who are on it won't sign it because they get in trouble with leadership. Discharge petitions have been done, a half a dozen times, I think, since the 30s.
Yeah,
they're very, very difficult.
Yeah.
I think, though, we purposely went out of our way to get the bipartisan sponsors to say something to Paul Ryan, but they're letting the chair of that particular committee, who doesn't believe in a lot of these loans, kind of control the show. So it's very unfortunate because it's not just Pell, it's Perkins, it's a lot of other programs in this area.
Yeah, we have about 30 seconds left. What do you see as the future for higher education in the United States? Is there ever going to be a time when we go back to, prior to Reagan's governorship in California, when state colleges were free all over the country?
Well, I think on the Democratic side, all the movement is around either tuition-free or debt-free college, because actually debt-free, one of the nice things about that is that takes into consideration living expenses, books, and other things. Mm-hmm. I think it's almost even more progressive. But those are where the momentum is. That's where most Democrats are in support of some of those bills that are out there, and I think that's positive. So every time they push negatively in this direction, we seem to have some ability to get things to move in the right direction on this. And I think also I would put in this category healthcare.
Okay.
The fact they're going so negative, that's why we have momentum on Medicare for all.
Great. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls. We'll be back with more of your calls right after this.
Hi there, I'm Marie with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving donations, volunteering, or spreading the word about Free Speech TV, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to exist. And for that, I want to say thank you. Now you can give to the network powered by the people by donating an unwanted or used vehicle through our Vehicles of Change program. If you have an old car, RV, or even a motorcycle, Free Speech TV can use it to grow and thrive. You can make a bigger difference in supporting Free Speech TV by giving an old car. It's a great way to support the network without having to dig into your bank account. Just call 877-378-8669 and ask for more information about Vehicles of Change. Again, the number to call is 877-378-8669. If it has a VIN, we'll take it in. Thank you.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
Mark Pocan, Congressman Mark Pocan, taking your calls here on the Thom Hartmann Program. And Mark in Hanover Park, Illinois, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you, Tom. Congressman, I want to know if there's anything that can be done to kind of redefine the dialogue with regard to things like affordable housing and small business. As an example, I'm a small business person, but I am nowhere qualified for any of the small business incentives and programs because I don't have enough employees or whatever. And affordable housing in my neighborhood, which is a middle-class suburb, housing could be $30,000 for a family of four. Now, if you're making an $80,000 a year income, that's still too much. But we think of affordable housing as being just for poor people.
Yeah, Mark, I agree with exactly what you're saying. Tom and I are both small business people as well. This is my 30th year being a small business owner, and I totally understand where you're at. I would argue the Democrats are raising the profile of these issues through their Better Deal plan, and while they're still, I think, putting all the various policy proposals out there, the idea of better jobs, better wages, better future, including things that are consumer-related issues like the cost of housing, like antitrust law, like small business issues, because I agree with you. So often people say small business and, they're talking about the businesses that already are doing extremely well. But I'm a small enterprise with less than 5 employees. Those are the sort of opportunities we've got to be able to provide, because that's where job creation really comes from, are those small businesses. So I think the Democrats are on the right path with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, with the conversations they've had around this. We just have to, I think, make sure that good initiatives come out for 2018, for the fall of 2018.
Stan in Westminster, Maryland, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, hi, Congressman Pocan. I'd like to know what are your thoughts on the CDC ramping up their efforts to inform the public about the possibility of a nuclear attack?
Yeah, whether this is timed because of what's going on with our leader in the White House or not, it certainly it's bringing the whole issue home, right? The fact that we have other countries with nuclear power, the power weapons, that we are instigating a fight with someone who we already are not happy that they have nuclear weapons. And then we have the CDC warning people about this, especially, folks in Guam and Hawaii and other parts, now that they know how far missiles can go. This is a reality for them. So, again, I think it goes back to the concern that we have had on the president's use of Twitter, and especially with how it relates to our international relations. The fact that people are connecting the two shouldn't even be in a modern America or a modern world.
Charles in Opelika, Florida, you're on with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, how you doing, Congressman Pocan?
Hi, Charles.
My question is this. We look at the red states as taker states. They usually are more dependent on federal aid. And I think with this border wall, what they're actually asking for is another handout, because how do you get from the point where if we do start building on the wall and we do start, sending federal dollars to these states, that they don't turn around and ask for more, and then you're in a trap where they're saying, well, the Democrats don't really care about border security, when we know we could actually do better. So that's my question, because you're actually just feeding into the budget as well, by giving federal dollars to them for this wall.
Yeah, Charles, I hear what you're saying. I don't think the discussion, though, is motivated by those states wanting additional dollars. I think this is a discussion that's motivated purely by Donald Trump making a crazy promise during the campaign to a bunch of people who don't look exactly like them, and that means white-skinned. And it's really an issue that's largely grown out of racism. And because the president did so well with that rhetoric during the campaign, he's trying to keep that base happy and he's totally bought into this. And even if Steve Bannon is gone, the racism has stayed in the White House and unfortunately in this president. And I think that's where the sole place the conversation about a wall comes in. So while there may be benefits to dollars coming to an area that already gets a lot of federal dollars, that's not the motivator. The motivator, unfortunately, is ignorance and racism, and unfortunately, it's coming from the White House.
Yeah. Congressman, we're 45 seconds from the end of the hour. Your thoughts on what our listeners, viewers should be paying attention to in the coming week? And what you expect?
One other thing. Yeah, one, keep watching whether or not the shutdown on the 19th, I'm guessing it may be a punt for a month. But watch the conversation around infrastructure, because the president, I think, is going to do a bait and switch. It's not going to be real infrastructure. He's already maybe going to postpone a January 15th release of his package. But if it's selling roads and bridges to private firms and we all pay tolls and things rather than putting real money into crumbling roads and bridges and schools and broadband and energy grids, we have to then be ready to really speak out, because you could have another boondoggle with dollars going to private companies and us not really getting a benefit out of it.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Congressman Mark Pocan, thank you so much for being with us today, sir.
Absolutely, Tom. Thank you.
Great talking with you. Congressman Pocan, you can reach him at, you can tweet him at at Rep Mark Pocan. You can check out his website at pocan.house.gov. We'll be back with more of our program, more of the news of the day. Boy, there's a lot going on right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Today on the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, we're reading from Barbara Honegger's book, October Surprise. The October Surprise the book is about was the 1980 Reagan campaign led by Bill Casey, who Reagan later made the head of the CIA, but he was Reagan's campaign director in 1980, about their actions with the Iranian government, cutting a deal where if the Iranians would hold the hostages throughout the election of 1980 to make Jimmy Carter look bad and weak, then if they won the election, they would sell weapons to Iran, which, of course, is a deal that they kept. We know of this as the Iran-Contra scandal. So I'm reading from the very last chapter. It's the epilogue, and it's titled A Kinder, Gentler Nation. President Reagan signed intelligence authorizations in 1984 and 1985, which were considered licenses to kill, according to top government officials. As we have seen, Oliver North and Amiram Nir's U.S.-Israeli covert operations were authorized by a still secret accord, never revealed to congressional intelligence committees as required by law, which may have also authorized political assassinations in the name of counterterrorism. We have seen that Vice President George Bush, this is the elder, met with Amiram Nir in Israel in late 1986, when he could have signed the accord with Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres, for whom Nir worked. Author Seymour Hersh has charged Oliver North with being President Reagan's assassination planner. We've reviewed reports that North boasted that anyone who leaked or threatened to reveal the administration's secret Iran initiative would be killed, and that some of the North Secord Hakim team were reportedly involved in political assassinations under the umbrella of counterterrorism. Given this context, it's instructive to note what has happened to many of the individuals who were reportedly involved in or knew about the secret negotiations between Iran and the 1980 Reagan-Bush campaign, and or about secret U.S. arms deliveries to the Khomeini regime in the early 1980s. So then she goes through the list of people. Dead: William Casey, CIA director, who reportedly attended meetings in Paris, France on October 19 and 20, 1980 with Iranian officials and agents of French intelligence to arrange an arms for hostages delay deal with Iran. The morning of Casey's first scheduled under oath testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee on the secret Iran initiative, he was struck by seizures in his CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, and underwent speech incapacitating left brain surgery shortly thereafter. Had he lived to testify, according to a lifelong friend and counsel, Milton Gould, Casey would have told, quote, the entire truth, end quote. He died on May 6, 1987. Dead: Amiram Nir died November 30th, 1988, in a plane crash in Mexico. Nir, who resigned in March of 1988, had been chief counterterrorism advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres. He was Oliver North's Israeli counterpart in the Near North covert operations covered by a still-secret accord reportedly signed by Peres and President Reagan, or according to some U.S. government sources, by someone at a lower level. Easily Vice President George Bush during his late 1986 meeting with Nir in Jerusalem, when Nir briefed Bush on the Iran arms initiative. Informed sources suspect sabotage of Nir's plane when Oliver North sought to introduce the secret U.S.-Israel accord as part of the defense in his trial on conspiracy charges. The Reagan-Bush administration refused to produce the document, and the conspiracy charge was dropped. Nir died 2 months before the start of Oliver North's trial. The truth of the final entry in Michael Ledine's book, Perilous Statecraft, may have something to do with his timely death. Quote, insofar as anyone may have had something dramatically new to add to our knowledge of Iran-Contra, it is likely to be Amiram Nir. Dead: Cyrus Hashemi died in London on July 21st, 1986, 2 days after being diagnosed as having a rare, virulent form of fast-acting cancer. Died 2 days after his diagnosis. According to Iranian-American arms dealer Hoshag Lavi, with whom he worked on a major Iran arms-related sting operation in the 1985 and early 86, Hashemi was assassinated by U.S. government agents. According to self-proclaimed CIA pilot Richard Brennicke, Hashemi had been a participant in the October 20, 1980 Paris meeting with 1980 Reagan-Bush campaign manager Bill Casey, Iran arms dealer Hoshag Lavi, Iranian officials, and agents of French intelligence to work out the original arms for hostage delay deal with Iran. Before his death, Hashemi was reported to have said that his 1981-82 U.S. arms sales to Iran had been necessary to obtain the release of the 52 U.S. hostages, released moments after Reagan's inauguration in 1981, and had been approved by the CIA, which Casey headed. Hashemi was also the instigator of the arms for hostages proposal, which resulted in the August 1985 TOW missile shipment to Iran. Dead: the Ayatollah Mohammad Beheshti, who reportedly sent a personal representative, according to one source, Jalal al-Din Farsi, to the pre-election Paris meeting of October 19, 1980, with 1980 Reagan-Bush campaign manager Bill Casey, and according to some reports, also with George Herbert Walker Bush. Beheshti died in a bomb explosion at Islamic Republican Party headquarters in Iran on June 28, 1981. Dead: William Buckley, CIA station chief in Beirut. And it continues. It's October Surprise by Barbara Honegger. By most American.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. There's a lot in the news that I wanted to talk about, both to share with you and in some cases get your opinion as well. The first is this announcement by the Chinese overnight that now this was not an actual policy announcement. It was an intention announcement, essentially. It's our intent moving forward to no longer buy U.S. bonds and maybe even to sell some. The Chinese are sitting on a little over $1 trillion worth of U.S. bonds, I believe. And this is driving up bond prices. The way that bond markets work is that as bond prices, as bond returns, go up, it's driving up bond yields, not prices. As bond yields go up, in other words, the amount of interest that they pay, if you are invested in a fund that buys and sells bonds, the older bonds become less valuable because the newer bonds pay a higher rate of return. And so the value of the older bonds starts to collapse. So if you're invested in a bond fund like TLT or whatever it may be, what you'll see is that your investment is going to lose money, even though the bonds are paying more. Right? Does it make sense? So then the question becomes, okay, if the Chinese follow through on this, if the bond market takes it seriously, and apparently it is, the German 10-year yield is now at 0.54%, less than 1%, which is insane, but it's still, this is the highest level since July, and this from a piece in today's Financial Times. And the Japanese 10-year government bond, which the government has been trying to hold at 0, has risen to 0.07 this week. So that's going up. And they said as the result of the sell-off, the biggest fixed income exchange traded fund, the $53 billion iShares fund trading under the symbol AGG, which tracks the U.S. bond market, lost 0.3% to trade at an 8-month low on Tuesday. Its international bond cousin fell 0.4%. So that's what I was talking about. But the question is then, if investors move out of bonds, well, first of all, for the long term and for average retail investors, as bond yields go up, it becomes more attractive to actually buy bonds if you want to park money for 5 or 10 years, or even 1 year, and know that you're going to get a guaranteed return. But it becomes much less attractive to own bond funds because they've got the old bonds in them, if you understand what I'm saying. So the question is then, where do people put that money? Does that money move out of bond funds and into the stock market and further goose the stock market? I would argue that that happened 6-8 months ago. And I base that on the investment newsletter that I get, the Aiden Forecast, that 6 or 8 months ago, maybe a little longer, came right out and said, you know, the bond market is going to go south, get out of your bonds and get into the stock market. Actually, it was much more than 6 or 8 months ago. And I, you know, this is, in retrospect, I could look at this and say, this was really good advice. I should have followed it. I didn't, but it was really good advice. And so then the question is, if people get out of bonds and they get into the stock market and it gooses the stock market, and the stock market gets too hot and it bubbles up, if it bursts, is it going to collapse? Does this increase the risk of, you know, there's two possible outcomes to this, major outcomes. One is it inflates the stock market. The second is that it actually causes people to lose confidence in the economy as a whole and get out of the stock market. Because when bond yields go up, that means interest rates have gone up. When interest rates goes up, it gets more expensive to borrow. It gets more expensive for businesses to borrow. Businesses in America are sitting on something like $6 trillion worth of debt. And you know, when the price of servicing that debt goes up, the value of their stock goes down. So could this destroy the stock market? I mean, you know, I don't know the answers to any of these questions. And I'm not sure anybody else does. There's you know, people predicting both, all of the above, none of the above, but it's something to keep an eye on. So just an FYI. Number one. Number two, the Me Too movement. This is fascinating. I'm guessing this has to do with the French culture. You'll recall that when Sarkozy was president, as I recall, it was it Sarkozy who? No, it wasn't Sarkozy who had his mistress. It was one of the French presidents who's now dead. And when he was at the funeral of another dead French president, and my apologies for not having a list of all the French presidents here in front of me. But anyhow, when he was this was like 15, 20 years ago, maybe longer. But he was at the funeral, and on his right side was his wife, and on his left side was his mistress. It was the president or the prime minister of France. So this letter came out of Catherine Deneuve, the legendary French actress. And it has been signed by more than 100 high-profile women. But it came out of France. And she writes that, and there were writers, historians, journalists, and entertainers who signed this letter. It was published in Le Monde today. She writes, "We defend the freedom to importune." Now, I think, this is kind of an anachronistic English word. It may be the perfect translation, but I think a lot of Americans don't know what they're talking about. What they're saying basically is we defend the freedom to act like a fool and take the heat for it, of course, but to offend somebody. We defend freedom to importune, indispensable to sexual freedom. They write, rape is a crime, but trying to seduce someone, even persistently or backhandedly, is not a crime. Nor is men being gentlemanly a macho attack. Men have been punished summarily, forced out of their jobs when all they did was touch someone's knee or try to steal a kiss. They go on to say that the denunciations and public accusations of people who, without giving them the possibility of responding or defending themselves, have been placed on exactly the same level as sex offenders. This expeditious justice, Catherine Deneuve writes, and 100 women have signed this open letter in Le Monde. This expeditious justice already has its victims. I would throw Al Franken into that list. This expeditious justice already has its victims, men sanctioned in their job functions, forced to resign, etc., while their only wrong is to have touched a knee, tried to steal a kiss, spoken of, quote, intimate, end quote, things during a professional dinner, or to have sent sexually suggestive messages to a woman whose attraction was not reciprocal. That's real interesting. Is this French culture? Or is, they're reflecting a point of view that I think was prevalent in American culture up until the last year, up until the Harvey Weinstein thing broke. So, or is this that the whole Me Too thing has just gone too far? Again, citing Al Franken. Once again, I don't know the answer to that one either. My guess is, my take on this, my thoughts on this, are that over time, what we're going to see is and this would be a good thing, is a substantial change in what we tolerate as a society in terms of, men being, and for that matter, women being sexually aggressive and pushy. It's just whether this is going to produce a lasting change or not, I guess, is one of the big questions. I think it already has. Whether it's gone too far, well, I think typically when you see revolutions, they always go too far, and then they recalibrate, then they pull back. But I think this is a real revolution, and I think it's a consequential one. I think it's an important one. So there's that. There's also the Republicans just got permission from a federal court to throw you off the voting list. I got to tell you about that. Donald Trump is giving a huge bonus to Deutsche Bank, which he owes hundreds of millions of dollars to. And we might be moving toward the ending of net neutrality.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
More news to share with you right after this break, and then we'll pick up your phone calls as well. Stick around. And welcome back. Marianne in Silverdale, Washington. Hey, Marianne, you are on the air. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks. Just a brief comment about the French, defending their right to flirt.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a big difference between that and the oppressive demands of sexual favors, even just not physically, but just, it gets in the way of business. And when it's not reciprocated, I think it's part of our American culture of violence. So maybe it will go over too far, but I think it's, well needed. I'm part of the Me Too, supporters too.
Yeah, me too. I would add that there's a third category too that we need to acknowledge, and that is broadly I'd call it the Al Franken category, which is he wasn't trying to get any of those women into bed. He wasn't doing a Harvey Weinstein at all, and he wasn't propositioning them. It was none of the above, and yet he went down for that. So.
Right. He was, the culture at the time allowed for that kind of comedy, and it doesn't now.
Correct.
And so I agree. But what I called about was that last night I heard Daniel Ellsberg speak in Seattle, and I plan to go see the movie The Post here on the 12th. But he was informing the crowd again about the dangers of nuclear war and nuclear winters and how we will all starve to death and how we are at a critical moment as not since the Cuban crisis in '62. And it was all pretty depressing. So I'm wondering what happened, to that bill requiring more of Congress to share the authority to launch a nuclear bomb. And if it was unable to be voted upon, is there any movement today, since this week, every broadcast, everyone is talking about the inability of the president to serve, and what is anyone doing about it to remove him, starting the 25th Amendment procedures to oust him?
Yeah, the 25th Amendment might be even more of a long shot than impeachment, and impeachment is, I think, a real long shot because of Fox News and right-wing hate radio. But we'll see. With regard broadly to the issue of nuclear to your specific question, legislation. There has been legislation introduced into the House of Representatives. There has been legislation introduced into the Senate. And there's several different pieces of legislation that have been introduced by different members that would distribute, shall we say, the power of the president to start a nuclear war. The problem is that Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan will not allow any kind of vote or even a serious discussion of any of these kinds of legislation. As long as the Republicans control the House and Senate, they are not going to allow anything that might be viewed as diminishing the power of Donald Trump. So there we are, Marianne.
When these two leaders are holding the whole world hostage under their nuclear bombs, is short of pitchforks on the White House, is there nothing we can do?
If today you contact 3 friends and make sure that they are all registered to vote and that they know that the Republicans are suppressing votes, so they need to double check their voter registration, and you do that every day, and if everybody listening to this program did that, we would reach millions and millions of people, and we need a critical mass. Elections are being won by 50 and 60% of the vote, of the potential vote, with turnout of 50 or 60%, and we need to get it up to 70, 80, 90%. We need to get people engaged, and that's how we do it. Marianne, thank you for the call. Excellent question. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Louise tells me I'm mispronouncing Catherine's name. It's Catherine Deneuve. I was saying Deneuve. I don't know how to speak French or pronounce French. My apologies to anybody who is either a Catherine Deneuve fan or knows how to speak French. It's just, Anyway, so there's that. There are a couple other quick stories here I want to get to, and then, as I said, we'll pick up your phone calls. The Chinese bond thing I talked about, and we're seeing the stock market is kind of soft right now. I don't know that this is going to be the thing that pushes it over the edge, but time will tell. Meanwhile, back in 1982, The second year of the, well, arguably the second full year of the Reagan administration, the Republicans, you'll recall, it was in 1980 that Paul Weyrich said, I don't want everyone to vote. Elections are not won by the majority of people now, and they never have been in American history. In fact, quite candidly, our leverage in the elections goes up as the voting populace goes down. That's a verbatim quote from the guy who was the co-founder of the Heritage Foundation and one of the leaders of the Reagan for President campaign, one of Reagan's campaign advisors. And he was speaking to a group of Republican activists in Dallas in 1980 when he said that, we need to suppress the vote. If Republicans are going to seize and hold power in the United States, we've got to stop black people from voting. We got to stop Native Americans from voting. We got to stop Hispanics from voting. We got to stop elderly people from voting. And we've got to stop young people from voting because all of those constituencies on the issues agree with the Democrats rather than agree with us. So we need to make it so that basically the only people voting are upper middle class white people and, of course, wealthy white people. But there's not enough of them to flip an election. So they need to use their propaganda outlets like Fox News and right-wing hate radio to pitch billionaire-friendly talking points like, hey, we need to cut government, which really diminishes the power of you and me and increases the power of billionaires. Or, hey, we need to reduce spending, which actually cuts programs that you and I are, use to survive and improve the quality of our lives and throws more tax breaks to the billionaires. Or, hey, we need to deregulate. Cut regulations, which, of course, means that more of us will die from poisonous air, poisonous water, unprotected food supply, drug supply. You fill in the blanks, right? I mean, regulations are consumer protections. That's what they are. And if you can get average working people repeating that mantra, you're golden. And that's what's happened. The scam artists in the Republican Party have, through their propaganda outlets, the right-wing hate radio and Fox so-called news, they've gotten people to do this. So anyhow, back in '82, when they were just in the process of getting people to do this, they knew that they had to knock people off the voting rolls. And so all over the country, exclusively or largely in African-American neighborhoods and Hispanic neighborhoods, and in some cases in Asian neighborhoods, Republicans were doing something called caging. They would send a postcard that said, are you still at this address? Are you still registered to vote? And and the people were supposed to fill it out, say, yes, I certify under penalty of perjury that I am me and I'm still here, and then mail it back. And most people looked at the card and said, what the hell is this, and threw it away. So every card that didn't come back, the Republicans then went to the Secretary of State in that particular state and said, take this person off the voting rolls. They no longer live here. They no longer vote. And they succeeded in purging, we don't know to this day how many names, but probably hundreds of thousands. They're still doing this. This is what interstate cross-check is all about. Yesterday, Greg Palast pointed out in Virginia, where the control of the House of Representatives or the Assembly or whatever they call it, was just decided by a coin toss or by pulling film cans out of a container of some sort. They just decided this election because it came down to a tie after 38,000 people were removed from the voting rolls. Donald Trump wins Michigan by 10, 15,000 votes after several 100,000 people are removed from the voting rolls, particularly in Detroit and Flint. Donald Trump wins Wisconsin after Scott Walker purges a couple 100,000 people from the voting rolls. Ohio, one of the most aggressive states for purging people from the voting rolls. Indiana, under Mike Pence, purging people from the voting rolls. Pennsylvania, well, I don't know if Pennsylvania was, I believe they were, but in any case, this caging that the Republicans were doing in 1982 was so over the top and so illegal that a federal court ordered them not to. There was a federal restraining order that has been in place from 1982 until December of last year, until 3 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago. And at the end of December, the restraining order expired, just because it was like that long, right? It was, what is that, 45 years, 55 years, something, some 35 years? I can't do math in my head that fast, but it was, this restraining order was there. It just expired. And the Democrats went to court and said, please renew this restraining order because the Republicans use this technique, caging, to throw black people, Hispanic people, old people, young people off the voting rolls. And the court said, no, we're not going to get rid of it. The courts, by the way, that are being packed with right-wing ideologues by the Trump administration. Rick Hassan is a professor at the University of California Irvine School of Law, and in a piece over at Think Progress by Kira Lerner, he's quoted as saying, quote, "The removal of the consent decree could supercharge voter suppression efforts, offering Trump the opportunity to hijack the RNC and direct it toward his own efforts to explain away his 3 million vote loss in the American popular vote and rile his base against poor and minority voters. Count on it." Story number one. Story number two, net neutrality. The net neutrality was destroyed by Ajit Pai at the FCC, but there's this thing called the Congressional Review Act that allows Congress to say, you know, what this agency did in the federal government, we disagree with and we undo it. It's called a resolution of disapproval. And there are now 40 co-sponsors for a resolution of disapproval headed up by Ed Markey, the Democrat from Massachusetts, in the Senate. It looks like this thing is, because the 40 votes means that it goes for a full vote on the Senate floor, which would force the Republicans to take a position on net neutrality. Now, whether Paul Ryan will allow this to happen in the House is a whole nother question. But this is fascinating and important stuff. And finally, Donald Trump and Jared Kushner giving a big bonus to their bank. I'll tell you about that right after the break, and we'll pick up your phone calls. And, what do you think about Catherine What's-Her-Name's letter?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Catherine Deneuve, her letter. We'll be back. This is Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from a book edited by Rex Stout back in the 1940s. It's titled The Illustrious Dunderheads, and it's speeches given mostly by Republican congressmen in Congress, on the floor of the House and the Senate, talking about how we should not support England or Britain in their fight against Hitler, and how Hitler's a guy we can work with and all this sort of thing. If you saw the Churchill movie, Darkest Hour, this book will ring a lot of bells for you. It's out of print. There are used copies floating around. This is a copy my father gave me as a gift years ago. So, The Illustrious Dunderheads by Rex Stout. It's a collection of speeches, as I said. The first one is by George Bender, the Republican representative from Ohio. And this is July 11, 1940. I wish to call attention to the statement made by an expert, Colonel Lindbergh. Quote, "Let us not be confused by this talk of invasion by European aircraft. The air defense of America is as simple as the attack is difficult when the true facts are faced. We are in danger of a war today not because the European people have attempted to interfere with the internal affairs of America, but because American people have attempted to interfere with the internal affairs of Europe. Regardless of which side wins the war, there is no reason, aside from our own actions, to prevent a continuation of peaceful relationships between America and the countries of Europe." Then on September 3rd, 1940, he said, "Any device at all that suits the convenience of the president." Keep in mind, FDR was president, and the Republicans didn't want to fight against Hitler because they thought it would get FDR elected for a third term as a wartime president. That was what this was all about. "Any device at all that suits the convenience of the president is used in order to get us into this war by the back door. The power of peacetime conscription in the hands of an administration that is proved by its record to have used every conceivable excuse for regimenting America, overturning all tradition, and changing our form of government is nothing but an invitation to disaster. We know that our people hate everything that Hitler stands for. We despise dictatorship in any form, but I challenge anyone to tell us the difference between executive orders issued by Roosevelt and those issued by Hitler." Republicans in 1940. But wait, there's more. This is from Hamilton Fish, Republican representative from New York State. This is June 22nd, 1940. "Colonel Lindbergh was right when he said in one of his recent speeches, 'Let us stop this hysterical chatter about calamity and invasion that has been running rife these past few days. It is not fitting to the people who built this nation. The only reason we are in danger to becoming involved in this war is because there are powerful elements in America who desire to take part in a war against Hitler.'" And then on June 22nd, 1940, he gave a speech at the House of Representatives. He says, "Let us have an end to the secret diplomacy and the secret commitments of President Roosevelt that have brought ruin and disaster to France and from which we have escaped only by a miracle, and the will of the American people expressed through Congress to keep America out of war." This was the America First movement back then. President Roosevelt alarmed the nation by his inflammatory Italian dagger thrust in the heart speech. And on August 5th, Republican Representative Hamilton Fish said, "Whom do we fear? Do we fear Hitler, who seems afraid to attack England over 20 miles of sea when he would have 3,000 miles to cross here? This is preposterous. Let us stop this fear hysteria." And then on September 3rd, he said on the floor of the House, Republican Representative Fish of New York, "Peacetime conscription in America is the direct road to Hitlerism, dictatorship, and National Socialism." See, he didn't want Roosevelt to start the draft. "If we adopt peacetime conscription, we are merely copying Nazi methods and ideology. Mr. Speaker, this Roosevelt Far Eastern policy of bluff and bluster has driven Japan into the hands of Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. No one in Japan really wants war with the United States, but it's quite evident that this highly proud and militaristic nation has got tired of being threatened and slapped in the face by us. We must not let our sympathies run away with our judgment and involve us in any Asiatic war 10,000 miles away that has no connection to the defense of the American continent. We have more to fear from the war makers within our country than from our enemies without." Yeah, got more to fear from Franklin Roosevelt than from Adolf Hitler. This is from Claire Hoffman, Republican representative of Michigan. And this is from a speech that Mr. Hoffman gave September 7, 1940. "Mr. Speaker, down into the hell of a war, in no sense our war, this president would plunge us to satisfy his ambition to break the American tradition that no man should be elected a third time to the presidency, and in order that he may go down in history as America's first dictator." Yes, this is Republicans speaking on the floor of the House of Representatives, calling FDR a dictator in 1940. This is 1 year after Hitler had invaded Poland. Back to the quote. "He told us, in effect, that we had no national defense, that we were open to successful invasion by a foreign foe. Thus, he created fear and hysteria. As on other occasions, when he had satisfied his penchant for theatrics by shouting 'fire, fire,' and calling Congress in special session at a cost of $500,000, he, figuratively speaking, now tucks his tongue in his cheek and goes off on a vacation. It is to be hoped on this one he will not, as he did on a prior occasion, see a mythical submarine. Roosevelt's threat to use the sovereignty of government is but the threat of a Hitler, of a Mussolini, a Stalin, to silence all opposition and all criticism. He has consistently arrayed class against class, preached envy and jealousy, the doctrine of hatred and fear, and his egotism is only equaled by his ignorance when we assume that patriotic Americans will tamely submit." The illustrious Dunderheads. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So this from the Herald Scotland back in 2008. "It has been 12 years since France buried its last but one president, François Mitterrand, at a funeral attended not only by his wife, but his former mistress and their daughter." Right. It's a lofty axiom of French opinion that the nation's attitude to sexual peccadillos is more tolerant and less prurient than that reflected in the drooling Anglo-Saxon media across the channel, and that their journalists and broadcasters have more important matters on their minds. So what's the situation there? Oh, I was going to mention Trump and the bank and then pick up your phone calls here. The headline by David Sirota in the International Business Times, ibtimes.com, "Trump administration waives punishment for convicted banks, including Deutsche Bank, which Trump owes millions." David Sirota writes, "Deutsche Bank has been fined for its role in a Russia money laundering scheme. Excuse me. The waivers were issued, and they issued a waiver saying, well, you don't have to pay the penalty. You don't have, we're going to let you get away with it. The waivers were issued in a little noticed announcement published in the Federal Register during the Christmas holiday week. They come less than 2 years after then candidate Trump promised, 'I'm not going to let Wall Street get away with murder.' In late 2016, David Sirota writes, the Obama administration extended temporary one-year waivers to 5 banks: Citicorp, Citigroup, J.P. Morgan, Barclays, UBS, and Deutsche Bank. Late last month, the Trump administration issued new, longer waivers for those same banks, granting Citigroup, J.P. Morgan, and Barclays 5-year exemptions. UBS and Deutsche Bank received 3-year exemptions. Trump owes the German bank at least $130 million in loans, according to the president's most recent financial disclosure form. Sources have told the Financial Times the total amount of money Trump owes Deutsche Bank is likely around $300 million. So if that's not helping your friends, it's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. Anyhow, to pick up your calls and your thoughts on what's going on, Anita in Canandaigua. Thank you, New York. Yes. Hey, Anita, what's up?
Yeah. So, hi, Tom. I don't think this has gone far enough, the Me Too movement, and I'll tell you why. It seems to me there's always this concerted effort to head off any progress women make by using hysterical scare tactics, such as the idea that well-meaning men will suffer some fallout from this movement. All those arguments seem to stem from the perspective of men who are scared or reluctant to relinquish power over the public places that we all share. And they say things like, I don't want to learn to act properly, and I don't want to pay attention to my words and actions, and I don't want to take no for an answer. Or
I think that's all changing, Anita. But do you think that Catherine Deneuve's letter and the people who co-signed it with her, and I haven't seen all the signatures, or any kind of an analysis of it. I'm sure it'll be coming out as the day goes on, but I don't know how many were French as opposed to citizens of other countries.
Right.
But do you think that her perspective represents the French culture, as opposed, that perspective would not be agreed with here in the United States?
I don't think so, because I remember a while back that there was a very inspirational video about what if the French culture was switched male-female. Mm-hmm. They had such things as a man being assaulted by a group of women on a street and going in and telling his wife didn't believe him. She called him, wimpy and such, and then took him to the police station where the male police officers were being treated as underlings, and the female police officer was like, well, what's the problem? I don't see a problem here, and just sort of pushed off his assault.
Interesting.
And it made him feel small.
So what you're asserting is basically the French culture is highly tolerant of essentially these grosser aspects of patriarchy, for lack of a better way to describe it, and more tolerant of what you and I would describe as sexual abuse or aggression or offense.
I think it has to do with how long a culture has been dealing with issues and or care to talk about the issues.
Yeah.
They are much more open about sexuality over there, as you had been speaking about the mistress and the wife and such.
Right.
But I mean, worldwide, I don't think that in general that this movement has changed anything. If we're only, I know the women's lib movement's very old, but I'm saying that if this movement is so young still and we're already being told we have to think about men's feelings, well, I kind of have news for everybody. We've been thinking about, men's fragile feelings and fear of rejection for our entire history, and I think that they should be taught, until we can teach them at a very young age to act appropriately in all situations, the way that little girls are taught every single day to, watch what they say and do and act appropriately and not, ever think about sex in the workplace. I mean, it's just common sense. And if we're already thinking, oh no, a guy won't be able to get a date, I don't really care about that. I'm sorry. I really can't even feel anything about that.
Yeah.
So he just needs to, follow the rules like anybody else would. And be appropriate.
I agree.
That's what we need.
I guess the question I'm asking is, are the rules different in France than here? I honestly don't know the question.
Probably.
I'm not French.
I mean, over there to smile at someone is considered an open invitation to flirt. They don't smile as much, you'll notice. And I was told that by many French people. I was over there. I made my best effort not to be a goofy, smiley American, because then, it's different.
That's viewed as an invitation.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
An indication of sexuality being different over there.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, Anita, thank you for the call, and thank you for your thoughts. Very well developed. Mark in Scioto, Oregon. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Tom?
Yeah.
Your comment that all homeless are Caucasian is outrageous. Your comment that...
I didn't say all. I said I've not seen any Hispanic homeless people in Portland, and I've seen a lot of homeless people. The vast majority of homeless people
You commented that all homeless are Caucasian.
No, I didn't say that.
You're just saying for the homeless, it's mind-boggling to me. I thought you had a heart. I thought you were a decent person. To treat poor Americans like that is just unbelievable to me.
Mark, I'm sorry I offended you. I'm not going to apologize for something I didn't say, and you have no idea what my thoughts are or my attitudes towards homeless people. Or to the extent that I've talked about. Anyhow, Ken in Reisterstown, Maryland. Hey, Ken, what's up?
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
Okay, actually, I'm kind of curious how you feel about the Kate Steinle verdict.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Are you serious?
Well, I know that Kate Steinle is a big bugaboo over on Fox News, and that anybody who watches Fox News or listens to right-wing hate radio all the time is very, very familiar with, she's the woman who was killed by the... Yeah, stop talking over me, Ken. She's the woman who was killed by the undocumented immigrant in San Francisco, right?
Illegal immigrant.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. And it turned out that he dropped his gun and it accidentally discharged, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, that's the story you guys want to carry.
Ken, it's what the court decided.
Okay, let's...
Ken, thanks a lot for the call. Jill in Midway, Pennsylvania. Jill, what's on your mind? I don't know what happened. Is the full moon out or something? Or anyway, Jill, what's on your mind?
I wanted to say bless you. I just listened to the last two calls. But I was recalling in response to the Catherine Deneuve letter.
Yeah.
Of course, this is a pretty big, it's such a huge bugaboo, and it's neat. Something has been needed to be done since forever. Let's just put it straight.
Mm-hmm.
But I do worry that it will be taken too far. And again, like that one woman said, they'll start saying, "Oh, they're being hysterical. Men are losing their jobs because they put their arm around you and squeeze your shoulder," and da 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 da.
Right.
Sexual harassment is when someone of power is using that power to try to get sex from or just be obnoxious with women and get away with it.
In a sexual way, yes.
Yeah, and part of the problem here is that women are not taught how to stand up for themselves, and men are not taught that what really sexual harassment is. You have to learn that if you're attracted to a female and they say no, that doesn't mean you're an awful person. That doesn't mean that's not a put down you personally. It is just chemistry. A lot of
Jill, isn't there also a piece of this that is, on the one hand, you've got, we're talking about sex. What about romance?
Romance?
Yeah. Yeah. At what point does an attempt to be romantic be interpreted as an attempt to be sexual, and thus brings the wrath of God down on you, when it was simply an attempt to say, hey, can we have a relationship?
Right. Well, a few years ago, I had somebody that used to constantly joke with me about sex, and I finally turned around and said to them, "I know that you're trying to make this sound like a joke, but if I ever agreed to what you're saying, you would jump on it in half a second. You would love it."
Right, but see, that was sex, not romance. That's a completely different thing.
Right, and it's hard. It's hard because we do not talk about sex in this country very much, and we do not let people in school talk about sex education because, oh my God, sex.
Yeah, I think that's going to change. At least I hope it's going to change. Jill, thank you for the call. These are important issues. I'm sorry we're out of time here. We're hitting a break. Jill, thank you so much. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. just went silent. Welcome back, Anita in San Antonio, Texas. Hey, Anita, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Yes, this is in response to the woman that said she didn't think the Me Too movement had gone far enough.
Mm-hmm.
I have to disagree only because I see when we're reaching back to men who may have behaved in a way that may have been acceptable in the past.
Like Al Franken on a USO tour?
Exactly. Or maybe, and one of them was he put his arm around somebody, and maybe she had been traumatized or something at one point in her life, and she was ultra-sensitive. She was overly sensitive to that, or sensitive to that. But I think we need to be careful. We do need to teach our sons to respect women. We need to be careful about how we reach back. We need to punish the predators, and we know predators when we see them. I mean, obviously this Roy Moore guy was a predator. Donald Trump is a predator. There are some men that are predators. Al Franken was not a predator.
Right.
And so I think we need to be careful. I was watching HBO or something, Showtime, one of those paid channels, and Splash came on. Remember the movie Splash?
I never saw it. That's the one about the, wasn't that Daryl Hannah playing a fish, a mermaid?
Right.
Yeah, I remember when the movie came out, but I never saw it.
Well, there's a scene where there's a wedding in the beginning of the movie, and John Candy, who plays his brother, is looking under the women's dresses. Now that would not be acceptable, but people thought that was funny
right
at that time. So we need to be careful. We need to teach our children, our boys, to respect women, because I don't think it's about sex; it's about respect.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I do think we need to be careful about reaching back and saying, "Oh, well, this guy, he grabbed my leg or he put his hand on my leg, and I think, I felt uncomfortable with that. So we need to destroy his life."
Right. Yeah, and this is, I think this is going to shake out, Anita. I really do, and I'm encouraged by the movement so far, and I'm optimistic that we're going to hit a new kind of stasis, a new balance point, and that balance point is going to be less tolerant of persistent aggression. But we have to keep space in there for people to, even in the workplace, for people to have romance. I think that there's a real difference between the kind of stuff that Harvey Weinstein was doing, which was just aggressively, power, sex, and domination, and a lovesick puppy, or that sounds too friendly, but some guy or a woman for that matter. I mean, it works both ways, arguably, although men are typically in the power position. But, a person who thinks, hey, maybe this person is the person that I should marry.
Well, no, I know. And I think men are scared. They're nervous. They don't know where those boundaries are.
That's right.
And it's got to be difficult. I've talked to men in my life, and they're thinking, well, have I ever done anything that somebody might perceive as something, or they'll just be afraid to be around women. I've heard of businessmen, CEOs, who have said they don't want to hire women. Or
they don't want to travel with women.
Right.
I mean, that's a real common problem.
With a woman.
30 years ago, I was running a travel business, and the vice president of one of the largest companies in America wanted to go down to Mexico with me as a travel executive to look at, I'm hitting a break here. I can't even tell the story. Anita, thanks for the call. I got a boogie. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Thank you.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news.
Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them
in standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day,
every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Back. Let's see here. Oh, it's Ellen Ratner, I believe. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. And Ellen, I don't have any words here on my screen. Is that you?
It is me.
Hey, Ellen, wonderful. So what's going on in the world today?
I have a new puppy. Well, okay. So there's a lot going on. First of all, the Supreme Court heard the Ohio case on purging voter rolls. And it's very interesting. It's not sure. I would expect it would be a slam dunk because there was a guy who was in the military. He didn't vote because he was on assignment. And you know, I would have thought, well, they would say you shouldn't have purged his name. But
Right.
That's not what they said. And in fact, Justice Kennedy, who is known as the swing vote, but he's a conservative, he said, what we're talking about is best tools to implement that purpose. And what he meant is that allowing the votes to protect the voter rolls. I mean, I can't make this stuff up, but that's what they decided today.
So the Supreme Court said it's okay for individual states to purge people from the voter rolls simply because they didn't vote in the last election?
Opinion yet.
Oh, they
All
haven't
we
issued the
heard
opinion.
Is the argument.
I see, but in the arguments, you got the sense that Kennedy was on the side of the vote purgers. I mean, he was put into the Supreme Court by a Republican president.
Right, of course, yes. And I got the impression today that he was on the side of the vote purgers.
Amazing. What else is up?
I can't make this up. By the way, also, Huma Abedin and, as you know, Anthony Weiner were divorcing. He's in prison. But apparently, as of today, the lawyers withdrew the divorce. So that's also going on.
Yeah. Having a kid together is a bond, you know.
Right. Well, exactly. Steve Scalise, who, as you know, was shot, he's having additional surgery today. The president today went after the libel laws. And I have heard from Democrats that, hey, he's just trying to protect himself. He's a public person. And he's saying the libel laws are unfair. They need to be looked at. I mean, you cannot make this.
Well, he said this before, that he wants the United States to adopt the British libel laws. Great Britain has no First Amendment. There is no constitutional right to free speech in the United Kingdom. And as a result of that, it is possible for public figures to sue people for libel in a way that is not possible here in the United States, because we do have the First Amendment. And so it sounds to me like, and Trump has explicitly said we need to have the English libel laws here in the United States. Clear, you know, it was a couple of years ago that he said that, but I think or a year and a half ago, but I think it's that he doesn't understand our Constitution.
Well, he also said that today, and even in England at Speaker's Corner, where you can say anything except you can't say anything about the royal family.
Right. Yeah, because there's no constitutional right for free speech in the UK.
Right.
Anyway.
Okay. Darrell Issa is not going to run again, and he's from the 49th District in California.
Oh, he was going to get beat so bad. I said he was going to get beat so bad. Pardon my interrupting you, Alan. Go ahead.
He's from...
Ellen, you're fading in and out. I just lost Ellen. Do we still have her audio?
I'm here.
Oh,
I hear
okay.
you.
We'll play you through your Skype audio, Ellen. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. So Darrell Issa is not running again, and that's not terribly surprising. As you know, he wasn't going to win, as you said. Also, that the microbeads are gone in the United Kingdom. President Obama got rid of them in 2015. There is also a move, it's interesting, and I don't know what it means, but Florida Republican Ron DeSantis asked the House to declassify the FBI and Trump files and the dossier files. Now, I don't know whether he's doing that because he feels that there's no connection to the Russians, or he just believes that people ought to be reading it like Dianne Feinstein believes. I just don't know.
Yeah, interesting. Did you catch, by the way, that day before yesterday, I believe it was, maybe yesterday, Michael Moore tweeted out a picture of a drilling rig and said he had just rented a drilling rig, a fracking rig, that he was going to use to drill off the coast of Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Now that Trump has opened up that to exploration, and within 24 hours, the Trump White House says, oh, wait a minute, we didn't mean Florida.
Right. And now what's going to happen, Massachusetts, you know, is also a drilling area, and they have a Republican congressman. So everybody's wondering what's going to happen with Massachusetts. I mean, governor, not congressman.
Yeah, interesting. But he doesn't have probably doesn't have the kind of juice that Rick Scott does. But I'm wondering if it was Rick Scott who made the day, or if it was Michael Moore threatening to drill off the coast of Mar-a-Lago.
I'm going to put my bets on Michael Moore.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So
and by the way, the president is going to be going to Davos, Switzerland, to push the American thing. But I think he's going also because of his own interests.
What you mean, his Trump businesses?
Right.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, because the whole Davos thing is a world without countries, a world without borders. I mean, it's John Lennon's Imagine song on steroids. That's Davos.
For sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, it's very interesting. In today's one-pager from Darrell Issa, he said that they got rid of earmarks. Well, it's very interesting because yesterday, President Trump defended earmarks in that 55-minute on camera thing.
Ellen, we're out of time, but thank you for the news today. It's great talking with you. Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News. Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. It's Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from a book edited by Rex Stout back in the 1940s. It's titled The Illustrious Dunderheads, and it's speeches given mostly by Republican congressmen in Congress on the floor of the House and the Senate, talking about how we should not support England or Britain in their fight against Hitler, and how Hitler's a guy we can work with and all this sort of thing. If you saw the Churchill movie, Darkest Hour, this book will ring a lot of bells for you. It's out of print. There are used copies floating around. This is a copy my father gave me as a gift years ago. So, The Illustrious Dunderheads by Rex Stout. It's a collection of speeches, as I said. The first one is by George Bender, the Republican representative from Ohio. And this is July 11, 1940. I wish to call attention to the statement made by an expert, Colonel Lindbergh. Quote, Let us not be confused by this talk of invasion by European aircraft. The air defense of America is as simple as the attack is difficult when the true facts are faced. We are in danger of a war today not because the European people have attempted to interfere with the internal affairs of America, but because American people have attempted to interfere with the internal affairs of Europe. Regardless of which side wins the war, there is no reason, aside from our own actions, to prevent a continuation of peaceful relationships between America and the countries of Europe. Then on September 3rd, 1940, he said, any device at all that suits the convenience of the president. Keep in mind, FDR was president, and the Republicans didn't want to fight against Hitler because they thought it would get FDR elected for a third term as a wartime president. That was what this was all about. Any device at all that suits the convenience of the president is used in order to get us into this war by the back door. The power of peacetime conscription in the hands of an administration that is proved by its record to have used every conceivable excuse for regimenting America, overturning all tradition, and changing our form of government is nothing but an invitation to disaster. We know that our people hate everything that Hitler stands for. We despise dictatorship in any form, but I challenge anyone to tell us the difference between executive orders issued by Roosevelt and those issued by Hitler. Republicans in 1940. But wait, there's more. This is from Hamilton Fish, Republican representative from New York State. This is June 22nd, 1940. Colonel Lindbergh was right when he said in one of his recent speeches, "Let us stop this hysterical chatter about calamity and invasion that has been running rife these past few days. It is not fitting to the people who built this nation. The only reason we are in danger to becoming involved in this war is because there are powerful elements in America who desire to take part in a war against Hitler." Then on June 22nd, 1940, he gave a speech at the House of Representatives. He says, "Let us have an end to the secret diplomacy and the secret commitments of President Roosevelt that have brought ruin and disaster to France and from which we have escaped only by a miracle, and the will of the American people expressed through Congress to keep America out of war." This was the America First movement back then. President Roosevelt alarmed the nation by his inflammatory Italian dagger thrust in the heart speech. And on August 5th, Republican Representative Hamilton Fish said, "Whom do we fear? Do we fear Hitler, who seems afraid to attack England over 20 miles of sea when he would have 3,000 miles to cross here? This is preposterous. Let us stop this fear hysteria." And then on September 3rd, he said on the floor of the House, Republican Representative Fish of New York, "Peacetime conscription in America is the direct road to Hitlerism, dictatorship, and National Socialism." So he didn't want Roosevelt to start the draft. "If we adopt peacetime conscription, we are merely copying Nazi methods and ideology. Mr. Speaker, this Roosevelt Far Eastern policy of bluff and bluster has driven Japan into the hands of Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. No one in Japan really wants war with the United States, but it's quite evident that this highly proud and militaristic nation has got tired of being threatened and slapped in the face by us. We must not let our sympathies run away with our judgment and involve us in any Asiatic war 10,000 miles away that has no connection to the defense of the American continent. We have more to fear from the war makers within our country than from our enemies without." Yeah, got more to fear from Franklin Roosevelt than from Adolf Hitler. This is from Claire Hoffman, Republican representative of Michigan. And this is from a speech that Mr. Hoffman gave September 7, 1940. "Mr. Speaker, down into the hell of a war, in no sense our war, this president would plunge us to satisfy his ambition to break the American tradition that no man should be elected a third time to the presidency, and in order that he may go down in history as America's first dictator." Yes, this is Republicans speaking on the floor of the House of Representatives, calling FDR a dictator in 1940. This is 1 year after Hitler had invaded Poland. Back to the quote. "He told us, in effect, that we had no national defense, that we were open to successful invasion by a foreign foe. Thus, he created fear and hysteria. As on other occasions, when he had satisfied his penchant for theatrics by shouting 'fire, fire,' and calling Congress in special session at a cost of $500,000, he, figuratively speaking, now tucks his tongue in his cheek and goes off on a vacation. It is to be hoped on this one he will not, as he did on a prior occasion, see a mythical submarine. Roosevelt's threat to use the sovereignty of government is the threat of a Hitler, of a Mussolini, a Stalin, to silence all opposition and all criticism. He has consistently arrayed class against class, preached envy and jealousy, the doctrine of hatred and fear, and his egotism is only equaled by his ignorance when we assume that patriotic Americans will tamely submit." The illustrious Dunderheads.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Drug statistics, specifically pot, marijuana. Drug statistics, this from the Drug Policy Alliance. In 2016, we don't have the numbers yet for 2017, the year just ended a few weeks ago, but in 2016, 653,239 people were arrested for marijuana law violations nationwide. And of those charged with possession, 89%, 574,641 human beings were charged with marijuana possession in the year 2016. The proportion of people incarcerated for a drug offense in state prisons who are black or Latino, 57%. Nothing close to 57% of the population. Obviously, we're not enforcing our drug laws in a way that reflects any sort of lack of bias. And the number of students who have lost federal financial aid eligibility because of a drug conviction, again, over 574,000 marijuana possession arrests just in 2016. Over 200,000 students have lost their ability to even apply for financial aid because of this sort of thing. I mean, this is a real train wreck. And in the midst of this, you got Jeff Sessions coming in saying, oh, yeah, we'll go into the states and bust things up. Tamara Todd is with us, the director of the Office of Legal Affairs of the Drug Policy Alliance. Drugpolicy.org is the website. You can tweet Tamara at drugpolicy.org. And am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Tamara, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is a hot topic. And there are some who are saying that Sessions' position is he's not actually going to have the Justice Department go after states or people in the states, that really all he was doing was asserting this is the law, we are going to at least observe the law, and if you don't like the law, talk to Congress. And that might actually provoke a change in Congress to decriminalize some of these things, or at least, lower them on the schedule. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it is true. He didn't say we're going to go into the states and enforce all federal law, because the reality is that the U.S. attorneys and the Department of Justice have to make choices about which laws they enforce and how they choose to use their resources. So the question now is, Jeff Sessions really going to divert, limited federal law enforcement resources away from enforcing violent crime, illicit trafficking across state lines, those types of things, and go after legal, regulated, well-run medical marijuana industries that are acting in accordance with state law and disrupt that? Or is he going to use those federal resources as they should be used to really, go after problematic issues? And that's is unclear. I think what it has happened, though, is he's injected some uncertainty into what's happened. And we've heard there was a chorus of outcry from both Republicans and Democrats, and many state AGs and state lawmakers by his rescission of the Obama-era memo that gave that guidance and created some consistency and stability across the states.
Right. So is your sense of it, as the director of the Office of Legal Affairs of the Drug Policy Alliance, is your sense of it that this, you got Cory Gardner, the Republican from Colorado, a longtime, such a hardcore right-winger, he campaigned on fetal personhood. Coming out and saying this is outrageous what Jeff Sessions is doing. Might it be that this is the moment for the country, our elected officials, to say enough of this crazy drug war?
It might be, particularly on this issue. The memo of the previous administration, it was always just guidance. People still remain somewhat vulnerable to U.S. attorneys. There were still huge problems posed by federal law, one example being banking, where despite the guidance of non-enforcement by the Department of Justice, banks were very, very reluctant to provide banking services to many in the industry. So and not by any means a complete solution. And now we see where there's even more uncertainty and the fear, is really the federal government going to jump in and start undoing what states and voters in states have chosen to do on their own? We now see in the latest public opinion polling that Republican voters for the first time support legalizing the use of marijuana. And then much higher support for that, of course, is respecting states' rights and the ability of states to move forward without federal interference, which really is, a bipartisan issue on this, is what we've seen. So it may be that in an effort likely by Sessions, since he's been very vocal about his dislike of marijuana and people who use marijuana, in an effort to disrupt and slow things down, maybe in the end history will show that he in fact sped things up by pushing Congress to come up with a more permanent, workable solution that allows states to proceed and other states to adopt legalization, because those numbers that you quoted at the beginning about arrests, the vast majority of those are actually under state law. Right. It's state and local law enforcement that does the vast majority of drug law enforcement. So there's still obviously a lot of states that should be looking towards reform and adopting reform on the local level and state level, and not using their resources, to give out these low-level marijuana arrests that then, as you pointed out, disrupt people in so many ways: employment, housing, ability to get a credit card, sometimes ability to vote. That can carry through, forward through your life, so that this small, what seemingly minor arrest that people make it out to be actually magnifies in a way that's really harmful to individuals.
Right. We're talking with Tamara Todd, the director of the Office of Legal Affairs of the Drug Policy Alliance. Drugpolicy.org is their website, and you can tweet them at drugpolicy.org. In one of the neat little tricks that they do in authoritarian regimes is selective enforcement of very, very broad laws. The example that comes to mind, and I don't know if this is still the case, it was, I think, about a decade ago. I had a guest on this program who was very familiar with the situation in China who was talking about it, was that in China there's a law that says that you can't move without the permission of the local police department, but nobody ever bothers to enforce or do that. And pretty much over the last 40 years or so, everybody in China has moved. So everybody is a lawbreaker. So when the government wants to take somebody down, that's one of the things that they'll do, is they'll go in, oh, you moved and you didn't register with the police, 5 years in jail. And, but really they're going after them because they're a dissident, or they're speaking out, that kind of selective enforcement. We saw this admitted to by John Ehrlichman as the specific strategy of the Nixon administration with regard to the war on drugs. He said, the Nixon administration's enemies were the anti-war hippies and black people, but you couldn't outlaw anti-war hippies or black people, so we highly criminalized heroin and marijuana, or marijuana and heroin, respectively, going after, in order to, quote, disrupt their communities, end quote. Could it be that Jeff Sessions is putting this back on the burner, not because he expects the Justice Department or the FBI or anybody else to do some massive nationwide enforcement, but rather that they know that a lot of the people who are, shall we say, troublemakers from the point of view of Jeff Sessions, the people who are calling for civil rights, the people who are calling for voting rights, that, liberals, progressives, young people in particular, are more likely to smoke pot than be alcoholics, seriously. And therefore they could use these for selective prosecutions. Or am I being totally paranoid here?
Well, I think it's far from being paranoid, because I think there's very concrete evidence that was the origin of the criminalization of marijuana and the criminalization of the other drugs. I mean, it's important to remember that, people use drugs throughout time and across race and across society, and we choose to criminalize some, like marijuana, very severely, and we choose not to criminalize others, like alcohol, based very much on, as we now know, the historical evidence shows, based on the racial groups and the society groups that were using those drugs. And they played out very much in that way. I mean, we have incredible racist enforcement of the marijuana laws in every state, every city, every county across the country.
It's terrible.
And we know that people use marijuana at the same rates across racial groups.
You're right.
But there's way
Hang on just a second, Tamara.
The Thom Hartmann Program.
Sorry, we hit a hard break there. Tamara Todd, the director of the Office of Legal Affairs of the Drug Policy Alliance, drugpolicy.org. Tamara, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Find my mouse. There it is. James in Wichita, Kansas. Hey, James, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Man, I have so much to say. I want to say that, I really like your program and stuff.
Thank you.
And, I watch a lot of Fox News. And I don't think I'm a hater.
Okay.
I don't think I hate anybody because I don't want them coming over the border, or I think that DACA is wrong because they're not legal, and people who are descendants of slaves have been here longer.
Mm-hmm.
But the electoral college thing, make me understand this. I don't really understand the whole dynamic of it. But if you just had like the more populated states like California, Oregon, and Washington, and over there in New York City, Maine, Virginia, then that means everybody else is just, oh, well, I don't get that. Because I heard everybody say, well, the popular vote. But how are the smaller states protected like Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas?
The rule of law that has to do with voting, James, was referred to prior to the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920 as one man, one vote. And now it would be one person, one vote. And what that means is that your vote for president or for anything else should count. Al Gore got 500,000 more votes than George W. Bush. Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. Why shouldn't they become president if they got more votes?
Because all they did is stay over here in California, Oregon, don't care about what people in
Texas No, take the Electoral College out of this. If the Electoral College did not exist, we would elect a president based on who got more votes. It doesn't matter what state they come from. We're all Americans, James.
Yeah, but I mean, the way you guys think over there in Oregon is the same way we think over here in Kansas or Texas, and then that would hurt us, I would think.
Why?
Because, about the guns and immigration and...
Yeah, you're welcome to think however you want, James, but this is a democracy. The core idea of a democracy is majority rules.
Yeah, but they will come in there and rule me and sit there and say, hey, give me that gun, give me this, give me that. That's the way I think of it.
Yeah, well, that's because you watch Fox News. I defy you to find any Democratic politician who's ever said they want to take away your gun, James.
Well, it's no different than the way you guys... there's no balance there in terms of, we taking away gay rights. You know what I'm sitting there saying? Nobody's going to do that. Oh, you're married, you're married. It's done, it's over. So my thing is... There's actually a movement to roll back gay rights. Well, if there's a movement, I haven't heard of it. I'm not a part of that movement.
Yeah, well, good on you, James. But it's very real. It's out there. It's part of the evangelical movement.
I watch Fox News, and I haven't seen that movement yet.
Yeah, well, I think they gave up on that fight, and probably because a lot of people who work at Fox News are gay. And, it's like everybody is getting it. White people are getting it, that they've got gay people in their families. But, so the white power structure has decided we're okay with gay people. But the white power structure is still not okay with people of color, for example.
Okay.
Which is why the Republican Party wants to throw them off the voting rolls.
But I get that part that you're saying that. But at the same time, when black folks give Democrats their vote, they don't do nothing for us. I just don't see it being the same correlation in a lot of terms, because we're not getting anything out of it.
Okay, so you and I, James, have a political point of view difference of opinion, but why does that mean that you think that the majority of Americans should not make a decision about who's president?
I think because there's so many different layers to it. Like, again, over there in Alabama with the Jones thing.
So it'd just be your layer.
I'll just give you one layer. The Jones thing over in Alabama. He got in there because of black people, but he's fighting for DACA. And my thing is, they have hookworms over there.
Yeah, James, we're out of time. I'm sorry. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Damon in Las Vegas. Hey, Damon, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi. Before I say my question or statement, I just want to tell James about I'm a black person too, and I just want to say why black people vote for Democrats versus Republicans is very simple. It's one thing to do nothing for us. It's another thing to do something against us.
Well said.
You understand that?
I do. Well said. So
Okay.
You wanted to talk about the Me Too movement, though.
Say again?
You wanted to talk about the Me Too movement?
Yes, I did. I'm 43 years old, and this is just an anecdote, and I wanted maybe some what was I supposed to do, basically? I'm 42 years old, so I'm kind of at that come up in a different time now. And I had this employee who worked for me. She was absolutely gorgeous, a real-life mail-order Russian bride. She was brought over here to marry some rich banker dude. They got divorced, and she had to find a job, so she came working for me. And we lived in the same apartment complex, blah, blah, blah. I used to give her a ride home every night. Liked her a lot. So anyway, I was paying her $10 an hour, so she found a real job.
Right.
The whole time she worked for me, I had a crush on her. One day she showed up at my house, drunk, confessed her on dying love for me. We hooked up, blah, blah, blah. You know, things ended. Life went on.
This is after she left your employment?
Huh?
Was that after she left your employment?
Yeah, because I was terrified. You know.
Oh, you were afraid of being accused of being a sexual harasser? Is that the deal?
Yeah, I was scared. Yeah, I didn't say nothing. But well, not only I didn't even know she liked me until she showed up at my house after she, like I said, found a real job because I wasn't paying her number $10 an hour. So she found a real job.
Right.
Showed up at my house. What was I? I mean, did she want to hook up the whole time? I mean, really?
Yeah.
What was? You know what I'm saying? What was I supposed to? Can someone tell us? This is a thing. I hear the women calling. This is my point. I hear the women calling saying, "Well, you men don't understand." But this woman, I had a crush on her for the whole year she worked for me. You know, who knows what could have happened? But I didn't say nothing because I wasn't, because she worked for me, and I didn't.
Are you guys together now?
No, but we dated for a while, yeah. But no, it's over now.
Yeah, but well, that's interesting. So basically, you know, you're telling the story of a business person who's afraid to flirt with an employee, which is a fairly reasonable fear, by the way, and interesting.
I wasn't even worried about, because the Me Too movement, and I'm 43 now. I must have been 40 at the time. 41, something like that. It's a couple years back. So I wasn't aware of the Me Too movement. I wasn't worried about, legal action, but I didn't want to.
No, you were just doing the right thing.
I own the business, so
I get it. Damon, I got
HR to worry about. Huh?
Yeah, Damon, excellent story, and thank you for calling and telling it. I need to move along and get other callers in here, but thank you, Damon. Jim in Littleton, Colorado. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
I'm glad he talked before me because there's the same situation for me.
Really?
Shoot, I don't know where to begin, but I was afraid of being, being.
He said, "Shoot."
Predator, or my wife getting mad at me. I had a woman come up to me and talk to me at the park, and she had 2 little boys, and she was telling me about her husband being on drugs, and she didn't want to go back home, and her parents wouldn't take her in. Her parents said leave him, but didn't offer to give him a place to stay. And I told her to go to Al-Anon, and.
So can you get to the bottom line, Jim?
Good meeting to go to, and I gave her a little bit of advice. But here I am the whole time worried about people around here listening, looking at me like a predator.
Right.
Going to take advantage of a situation. And I wouldn't even give her my phone number because, some woman calling the house and the wife will explode,
right.
And she wound up committing suicide with both her kids.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and I feel so bad about it. I finally found the pictures online because I said, I wonder if that's the same woman. It sounds like it so much, right? And,
So, James, if I could just cut to the chase here, is the story that you're telling similar to the previous caller that it's a man who was interested in having a romantic relationship with a woman and was afraid to say so for fear of being charged with sexual harassment?
No, I was fearful of the wife more than anything, her exploding. And, I mean, if it would have been me, I said, stay at our house until you can get yourself situated, but, no wife's going to put up with that.
Right.
And it's like
I see.
Time I had.
So this was just a friend, and you were concerned that your wife would misperceive.
Yeah, it wasn't a friend. Yeah. It was just a woman that came up and started talking to me about all her problems.
Yeah. Oh, and then
I'm
she.
Like,
this is.
Without.
Yeah, this is a variation on the, male executives are afraid to travel with female executives, or vice versa, for that matter, because of perception and you know, it's like, how do we work this stuff out? Jim, I got to move along, but thank you for the call and thanks for sharing your story. Steve in Chicago. Hey, Steve. Boy, you got a bunch of men calling about the Me Too movement. I got 4 in a row. Here, Steve, what's up?
Yes, thank you for taking my call. At the risk of muddying the waters even more, I mean, it becomes even more problematic when we start to say, well, yes, it's all right if you have this motivation that, you know, that you want to be romantically involved with a coworker. But in a nation of consenting adults, we're now placing this sort of arbitrary notion of morality on people who and judging them and saying that it's not okay, however, to proposition a coworker in a world of consenting adults to have, you know, just sort of no strings attached sex.
Well, yeah, and you're right, Steve. Some people just want to have sex.
Right, exactly. So I'm not going to judge those people. We've all, at least a lot of us, I can say.
Yeah, they're called affairs. They happen all the time.
Exactly. People have been in a situation in their life where, you know what, I'm interested in having no strings attached relationship, and that's fine. And I assume that there are people of the opposite sex or perhaps of the same sex who are capable of making that decision. So I would not be comfortable with a policy that says if your motivation is romance, it's fine. But if it's just sex, no, we get to go ahead and fire you or
well, in the abstract, that's an excellent point. However, you and I are looking at this or talking about this from the male point of view, and I suspect that for every one woman who is up for just random consensual sex, there's probably 10 men. I mean, this is.
And the other point I wanted to make, if I might, this whole question about, you know, who gets to be defined as a predator.
Yeah. Steve, we're out of time. I'm sorry.
Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be right back with more of your calls after the news and this message here at the bottom of the hour. Stick around. We're reading today in the Thom Hartmann University Book Club from Threshold, the progressive plan to pull America back from the brink. This is chapter 3, page 53. It's titled Population. Sometime between mid-2007 and mid-2008, China exceeded the United States as the single largest emitter of carbon dioxide, dumping an estimated 7 billion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere per year in 2008, compared with the U.S. estimated 6.2 billion tons that year. But China is a vast and populous country. On a per-person basis, Americans are still the most profligate producers of carbon dioxide, with the average American in 2008 directly responsible for around 19.4 tons of greenhouse gas, not to mention the portion of China's emissions that went to make products shipped to and consumed by Americans. Russia, with its less than modern industrial infrastructure, comes in second at around 11.8 tons per person. It's a cold country, and few homes are truly winterized. Then the European Union at 8.6 tons per person, and China at 5.1 tons per person. India, which is rapidly industrializing, is still one of the most efficient per-person nations in the world at 1.8 tons of CO2 per person per year. Although that's because much of the country is so poor they don't have cars, the winters don't require much heat except in the extreme north, and the focus of India's industrialization has been digital rather than manufacturing. The largest driver of all these processes that are tearing our planet apart and putting all life at risk is the increase in human biomass. There are roughly 1 trillion pounds of human flesh on the planet right now, and assuming a worldwide average food consumption of around 3 pounds per person, in the U.S. it's almost 5 per day, we're consuming around 7 trillion pounds of food per year. One result of this is that over half of the entire net productive capacity of the planet, the entire planet's ability to produce edible products from photosynthesis, is now used up, displaced, or wiped out by humans, leaving every other life form on Earth to compete for the leftovers. Our population growth has not been particularly even. In the first 100,000 years of human history, we averaged around 20 to 50 million people total. 60,000 or so years ago, as we moved out of Africa and began to cover the world, we crept up to a few hundred million by the time of Christ, 2,000 years ago. Around the time of the Crusades, when the world was, by most definitions, pretty well populated, we were coming into conflict with each other all over the world. There were only 500 million of us on the entire planet. Not long after the American Revolution, we hit our first billion humans on planet Earth in 1800. The second billion didn't take 165,000 years. We doubled our population in just 130 years, hitting 2 billion in 1930, just as the United States was sliding into the Republican Great Depression. But that economic debacle didn't slow the growth of human numbers. By the year JFK was sworn in, just 30 years later, the planet had added another billion humans. The growth in population was driven largely by cheap, abundant oil and fertilizer and pesticides made from it, the farm and transportation equipment fueled by it, and the processing, packaging, and distribution system made possible by oil that lets a person in Iowa have a lunch of tilapia fish grown in ponds in China, lettuce and tomatoes grown in Mexico, wine imported from France, and a fruit cup of berries imported from Chile and strawberries from Nicaragua. In this environment of relatively abundant food, even in the third world, our fourth billion took us only 14 years to add, 1974. Our fifth billion only 13 years, 1987. And our sixth billion only 12 years, 1999. As oil became more expensive, raising the price of food indirectly, since most of us are actually eating oil, population growth first began to slow in the first decade of the 21st century. Part of this was attributable to birth rate declines in developed countries, part to an explosion in the death rates because of TB and AIDS in the third world, part to famine and associated diseases in sub-Saharan Africa as deserts moved south due to global warming. But while growth is slowing, we're still adding people at a rate many times faster than just 3 centuries ago. Topsoil all over the world is vanishing. Transportation is becoming exponentially more expensive. And as human population density increasingly resembles the inside of a petri dish, diseases ranging from TB, more than 1 billion people are infected, and more die from that than any other cause worldwide, to AIDS, to the constantly mutating common cold and related corona and flu viruses, remember SARS, represent a menace that is dramatically amplified by the 1 trillion pounds of human flesh such diseases inhabit. We are not the first culture to reach this threshold of population versus resources. As I discussed at length later in this book, the Maori of New Zealand, a group of Polynesian explorers, are a prime example of a culture that, like the Europeans who discovered America, thought they had found a land of unlimited wealth and food, but ultimately learned that there is a limit to growth, the biosphere, and that when you unthinkingly hit that limit, life can become hellish and democracy nearly impossible. But the concept of a limit to growth, or a finite world, was largely unknown to the classical economists on whose assumptions, formulas, and work our modern economy is organized. In fact, the classical and neoclassical economists, from Malthus to Jean-Baptiste Say to Marx to Friedman, would suggest that the Maori hit the limit not of their biosphere, the ability of the land of New Zealand to produce food, but of their technology. They would correctly point out that today New Zealand houses several million more people than it did when that island nation was entirely populated by Maori. And modern technology has ensured that not only is there enough food, but that surplus agricultural land has been turned to a growing of fuel and medicinal crops. The book is Threshold.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
Any place you want. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Bill in El Dorado Hills, California. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today? And thanks for listening to Sirius XM, Bill.
Yeah, thank you. I called before, but I have lived in Paris, and I enjoy living there. With the Me Too, it is France has equal rights. The United States does not. So even though I disagree with Catherine DeVos, I actually understand what she was saying based over there. Over here, it wouldn't work. Over there, it does, because the culture's different and everything.
But doesn't that just mean, Bill, isn't that just a short way of saying that men have more power in France than they do here in the United States? And
no, women actually have more power, I think, in France than they do in the United States.
Then why do they put up with men hitting on them and whatnot? Or are they? I mean, you know, language is supposed to be a great indicator of how people, you know, how a culture works. You know, when I lived in Germany, people would use military metaphors. They'd say, "We're going to crush the opposition. We're going to destroy this other, you know, our competitor, et cetera, et cetera." And there's all these words in German that are variations on military terms that are used in normal conversation. In French, and I don't speak French, Excuse me, so I might be completely wrong about this, Bill. But what I've heard is that in French, there's a lot of words in the French language that are used to describe, sex and romance in ways, in many of those words that we don't have in English or that we've adopted, from the French. So, is it that they're, as a culture, that they're more finely tuned, more calibrated to what the other gender is actually up to, and therefore less likely to step over that line, or just more? I don't understand it, Bill.
Well, here in the United States, when I greet somebody and I'm close to them, I give them a hug.
Right.
Okay. Over there, it's called la bise, which is the kiss.
It's like an air kiss.
You kiss them on the cheek.
Right.
And you don't hug, because a hug is intimate for someone who's close, like your husband or wife or whatever you do. So it is cultural, but I've never seen. I have seen in Italy where people are, really kind of is grotesque. But
the way men treat women in Italy is I've seen that myself too. It's wolf whistle on steroids.
Yeah, and I've never seen it in France, and I have never seen it in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how to explain it. I do want to augment this, because when they're talking about prescription drugs, if you buy EpiPen here, is like $400 for two of them in the generic portion of it. You buy an EpiPen in Paris at a pharmacy, it's the equivalent of maybe $9.
Right, which is what it used to be here in the United States before Joe Manchin's daughter got a hold of it. What's her name? Heather Bresch, I guess. Okay, interesting stuff. Adding to our database. Bill, thank you for the call. Marty in Evergreen Park, Illinois. Hey, Marty, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Happy New Year. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
I just wanted to throw out there, as being somebody who actually married my coworker about 10 years ago.
So you met your wife at work?
Yes, we did. Yes, I did. And we started dating after we had both left that company, but we actually ended up working together in another place too. But I was going to say, it's a good place to meet somebody, because you get to see your partner, in a professional atmosphere. You guys get to know each other's personal and work habits, and when it works out. And I've seen a few work relationships where the people have ended up getting married, and it's been very successful. But outside of like intimidating and harassing, it's actually not. I don't think it's a bad place to meet your significant other.
Yeah, we need to get to the place in our culture where the slicing and dicing, the understanding of, the difference between assertions of power, assertions of sexuality, and simple attempts to seduce or romanticize are viewed as different things, and have different societal reactions to them, and I we're not there, obviously, and again, I'd say Al Franken is an example of that, but we need to be moving in that direction. Marty, thanks for sharing that story. It's a fascinating one. Satya in Kent, Washington. Hey, Satya, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I hope you're not close to a break, because I think this is about 90 seconds of what I wanted to say.
Okay, no, we've got a couple minutes.
Great. Well, you really just said what I wanted to say about different things people interpret. I had a funny experience, but first I really want to say I think Al Franken, I've got a new verb, got Dan rathered.
Yep.
And it was just a rush to judgment. I'm sorry that due process didn't happen.
Driven by the right wing.
Exactly so. Exactly so. Well, and it is good that all this is coming to light with Me Too. I mean, these abuses do permanent damage, I know. But I had a different experience. I was talking to a guy after our legislative district meeting, and we were just kind of chatting. And you know how you think someone's hitting on you, so you sort of work in that you're married or something. And he started talking about his girlfriend. And I thought, you think I'm hitting on you. My God, until that moment, I thought he was gay. I didn't know he had a girlfriend, but I truly thought he was gay from the stuff he put on Facebook and things. So I know I wasn't coming on to him.
Right.
But he felt that I was. And so I have found myself saying to a couple of young men of my acquaintance, guys, get over yourselves.
Right.
Just get over yourselves. I mean, I'm friendly, I'm open, but I wasn't coming on to him.
Right.
And that, I thought, was another perspective on the whole thing that fits with the last two guys who spoke.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. Sasha, thank you for sharing your story with us. It's a great one.
Yeah.
And thanks for listening to KBCS. Doug in Hamul, California. Hey, Doug, what's up?
Hey, Tom, do you hear me?
I hear you just fine. You wanted to talk about the Electoral College?
Oh, Tom, yeah, I was flipping the channels, and I was listening to you here that talked to that guy from Portland, Oregon, and you're talking about democracy and the Electoral College. And the framers, they were brilliant. The Electoral College, not only was it an indirect check on democracy, because there was no definition of citizenship in 1787 or 1789. Citizenship didn't get defined to the 14th Amendment. And I like what you say. Oh, one person, one vote.
Actually, there was a definition of citizenship in 1789, Doug. In fact, it's written into the Constitution for the president, Article 2. Where did it go? The president shall be I'd have to find it. Oh, yeah, here it is. No person except a natural-born citizen, and citizen is capitalized, or a citizen of the United States at the time of adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible to the office of president. It's right there in the Constitution, number one. And number two, Doug, the call that you're talking about, for people who, because people are constantly tuning in and out and whatnot, this guy called from Kansas, and he said, he wanted to keep the Electoral College because he thought that even though Trump got 3 million fewer votes than Hillary Clinton, even though George W. Bush got 500,000 fewer votes than Al Gore and Hillary Clinton both won the popular vote, he felt that that still didn't mean that they should become president because the people of Kansas would be disenfranchised. And I was saying, if we have one man, one vote, or one person, one vote, it doesn't matter what state you live in, and I couldn't get him out of that headset. Is that what you're asserting too, Doug? I mean, you're in California. If you want to keep the Electoral College, you're in a state that's going to keep pushing Democrats.
So you did the standard progressive two-step. You avoided the question, then you sidestepped and interjected some more of your progressive dogma. Citizen in the Constitution is not a definition. It wasn't actually defined to the 14th Amendment. That's what I said. And progressives are not for citizenship. They are for one person, one vote, because they don't care who votes. You're against proof of citizenship requirements. So you can't say one citizen, one vote. And that's what I called in to talk about.
Doug, I'm not opposed to proof of citizenship requirements. I'm opposed to onerous ones. I'm opposed to when I first registered to vote, like 40 years ago, or maybe 50 years ago, nearly, when I first registered to vote, I had to prove that I was who I was. I had to show my driver's license. I had to prove that I lived there. I had to show a utility bill. They took my signature. Right? I signed the voter registration card. They took my signature. Now, that's biometric ID. It's harder to fake your signature than it is to fake an ID card. And they took my signature, and every time I voted, at least in Michigan all those years, every time I voted after that, they pulled out my card, and they compared my signature to the signature when I signed in to vote. We used biometric identification. It was solid. It went back to when you first registered, when you actually demonstrated that you had a legal right to vote. But the Republicans now, your buddies, Doug, they want to make it hard for people to vote. This has nothing to do with the integrity of the vote. Chris Kobach is prosecuting a guy who's a 60-year-old Republican for voting in 2 states. He voted for president in one state. He voted for local offices in another state. He thought because he had a home in both states, he could do that. I mean, that's how far down the barrel Kobach. He's only prosecuting 2 people, and one of them's a Republican, the other one I don't know. But neither one of them are, quote, illegal immigrants or anybody who this is.
Your signature didn't prove your citizenship. Your signature did not prove your citizenship.
No, my signature proved I was me.
No, your signature just is an affidavit saying.
Under penalty of law, you can go to jail for 2 years for faking that signature, Doug. Doug, we're out of time. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back with more of your calls after this. Welcome back. Elizabeth in Green Valley, Arizona. Hey, Elizabeth, what's on your mind today?
Thank you for taking my call. I've been listening to you for years, and I'm confused. How can Jeff Sessions arrest people when the U.S. government owns a patent on marijuana cannabinoids?
Having a patent doesn't preclude making something illegal.
Oh.
There's no, you know, the patent office has nothing to do with what's legal or illegal. It's just.
But in order to do that, they had to do research on marijuana to extract the cannabinoids.
Presumably.
And that would be considered a Schedule I violation.
Presumably, yeah. And I believe it was in the 50s or 60s, wasn't it, that the government got that patent?
No, it was applied for in 1999 by the Department of Health and Human Services, and it was approved in 2003. And then they made an exclusive licensing agreement with Canava Life Science in Pennsylvania, and that patent expires April 2019.
Oh, that's interesting. Elizabeth, I don't know the details about how that patent came about. I knew that there was one. I thought it was much older. Apparently I was wrong. But again, I'd say just because they might have broken the law to get it, or maybe it was done all based on theoretical stuff. I mean, it's not like the science was new, and that science was being done in other countries as well. Couldn't they just point to the science done in another country and say, based on this science, we're going to apply for a patent?
May I give you the patent number, and then people can go online and look it up?
Sure.
It's 6630 50, and then the last number is 7.
6630-507.
Yes.
Okay.
And when you go and look up U.S. patent, that number, it's very technical, but they go into all the chemistry, et cetera.
Right.
But this company has it to treat hepatic encephalopathy, and then the FDA approves a synthetic marijuana.
Is that an accumulation of water in the liver?
I don't know. I think it might have something to do with the brain.
No, hepatic is the liver.
Caused by the something is wrong with the liver.
Interesting.
And you can also look up Canava, KANNALIFE Science, Canava Life Science, and they have a webpage saying their whole purpose for this patent is the commercialization. And so I don't know how the federal government can arrest people when they have when they're selling it.
Yeah. Well, it certainly, on the one hand, it looks like hypocrisy. On the other hand, it also, I think, looks like the federal government in 1999 knew which direction things were going inevitably and was getting ready for it. Elizabeth, I thank you for the call. It's an interesting question. Thank you. We'll be back.
I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, You can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
Welcome back. Charlie in Glendale, Arizona. What's on your mind today?
Hi. At first, it was about weed, but the last two comments, you know, I'm an older guy in mid-60s, and in the 90s when the social media caught on, you know, there were so many dating sites, and all it was hookups. And there was more. Anytime you talk to a woman, they would hook up, and you would have sex. And you know, I don't know where all this has caught a blind eye. On the second thing isn't this going to follow the same as porno or pornography? If I'm not mistaken, it's still a federal offense for pornography. Yet they just kicked it down to the states and let it ride.
I think that the Supreme Court in the Linda Lovelace Deep Throat case back in the, what was that early 80s, as I recall?
I don't know.
Maybe even the late 70s, whenever that was. The Supreme Court ruled that there was artistic value in that movie, Deep Throat. Or one of the movies of that era, you know, Behind the Green Door. There was 2 or 3 real famous porn movies that were part of that, and you know, in fact, there was a famous preacher who came out and said, "Yeah, it's just art." I think that so you know, and number one, and number two, there are types of pornography that are still highly illegal. Charlie, child porn is you know, close to life in jail in most places.
Nobody said child porn.
Right. So child porn would be to pornography what heroin is to marijuana and the drug laws kind of thing. Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay. What are you saying?
Comparing what the federal government did to pornography. They're going to kick it down to the states. And if the states allow it, I mean, there's still dry counties where you can't buy a Hustler anywhere. And that's a state rule.
Yeah, you're right.
And so if they allow the marijuana, the weed in the states, and you know, they're just making a big thing out of nothing.
Well, see, that's where we were until last week when Jeff Sessions said that the federal government can start prosecuting people in the states that have decriminalized marijuana.
Well, of course.
They're legalized.
And they could still do that with pornography, but they don't do that anymore because they have bigger fish to fry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's an interesting idea. Charlie, thanks for sharing with us. Melinda in Salem, Mass. Hey, Melinda, what's on your mind?
Hey, I just wanted to add on to this whole Me Too movement and meeting your spouse at work. My rule of thumb is always treat your coworkers like you would treat anyone else. I mean, I don't know why it's so difficult for men.
It's the golden rule.
Kind of restrain the flirting in the workplace, where women are taught, you know, to sort of monitor their language, monitor their clothing from early ages.
Mm.
So when I hear this from men, I just want to, well, my eyes roll so much that they probably hit the back of my head several times.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are plenty of other places you can meet your spouse, and I just don't think work is one of them. I want to be treated as an equal.
So if you're in the workplace, Melinda, and there's somebody there that you're attracted to, are you suggesting that you would never want to let them know that? I mean, I could understand where if you say, "Hey, I'm attracted to you," and they say, "I'm not," that's that. Then you just literally stop at that point and don't ever bring it up again. But the current state of affairs is that the first time they say, I'm attracted to you, it goes on the network news.
That's if you're a famous person.
Yeah.
I'm talking about regular day-to-day operations. And, a lot of times it isn't just a superior to your position in terms of sexual harassment.
Right.
It's peer-to-peer, dealing with that day in, day out. Suppose you do reject them, and they're one of those people who doesn't handle rejection well. They
that's
can
their
continue
problem.
to harass you.
Yeah, that's their problem. And if they do harass you, they should be, there should be consequences to that. They should lose their job, or they should be facing some sort of, criminal penalty, or however it's appropriately dealt with, or even a civil lawsuit. But
HR,
Yeah, but the question.
If you're lucky enough to be in a company that has it.
Sure, but the question,
business,
and I'm
you're kind of hosed.
Right, and I'm trying to get to this because I've got less than a minute. Forgive my interrupting, Melinda, but the question is, how do we create a space where a person in the workplace can say the equivalent of, I'm attracted to you, are you interested in me, without the wrath of God coming down on their heads? Or is that not even a desirable thing to do?
I really don't think it's that desirable. Like I said, there's plenty of other outlets to meet, the person that you might be best suited to.
So we make the workplace an absolute no flirt zone.
Yeah, pretty much. That's how I feel about it. I don't flirt with my female coworkers.
Well, you're probably not going to end up married to one of your female coworkers.
Well,
right?
You don't know if I'm hetero.
Well, yeah, but you said female, not male. But in any case, Melinda, you raise great questions, and I don't have easy answers for them. Melinda, thanks so much for the call and for contributing to our conversation. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks so much for being with us today. It's been a fascinating day, a lot coming up tomorrow. And in the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It's not enough to sit around and complain. You got to get out there and do something. Get out there, get active, tag. You're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com.